Wake up! The shout tore through Art's slumber. A sharp exhale accompanied the force of Elijah's blows to Art's sternum, a pressure that could have revived the dead. Desperation prompted Art to toss the sleeping Sylvie at his assertive roommate, hoping her presence might shield him from further onslaught. "Sylvie, it hurts!" Elijah's howl was almost anticipated, given Sylvie's innate reflex to defend her bond, even if her form was not fully realized. "There's got to be a more humane method to rouse me from sleep," Art grumbled, massaging his abdomen. "Tell me about it. Do you have any idea how challenging it is to wake you? And then you repay me by chucking Sylvie at me. Even if she isn't in dragon form, her claws are like knives." Elijah winced, nursing the minor scratches inflicted by Sylvie's defensive reaction. "Regardless, we're going to be tardy if you don't pick up the pace and prepare, so get up and start moving," Elijah instructed, towering over Art's bed and nudging him off with his foot. "Let's go wash up, Sylv." Art feigned enthusiasm, seizing his companion and making his way toward the shower. "No, Papa, I don't want to shower. I'm clean." Sylvie's fervent protests fell on deaf ears as he carried her in. Sylvie's newfound fur, or the thin, long, soft scales resembling fur, made her a dirt magnet, thus necessitating more frequent baths. "Are you awake, Art?" Ellie's voice accompanied the door's opening, catching Art in the midst of changing. Elijah had already dressed, while Art's lower half remained unclad. "How do you like your big brother's awesome muscles?" Art struck various poses, displaying his physique. "Ew, all I see are skin and bones." Ellie responded with a headshake, her gaze assessing whether this was the same brother she had admired on her birthday. "Mom said to hurry up and get dressed so we can eat." Without waiting for a response, Ellie closed the door behind her. As Art began buttoning his shirt, a sigh escaped him. He thought back to Ellie's birthday party. Kids grow up too fast. The uniforms sent by Zyrus were rather standard. Art's ensemble consisted of a white dress shirt, a gray vest, a maroon tie to be fastened around his neck under the shirt collar, and tailored navy dress pants. A gold pocket watch dangled from a chain on his vest's breast pocket, adding to his scholarly appearance. Elijah's uniform, in contrast, featured a sharper design. His black blazer bore white trimmings that matched those on his black pants. Instead of a string tie, Elijah sported a black square-end tie with a single white stripe, indicating his level 1 student status. A badge, featuring a crossed sword and staff, was intricately etched over his jacket's breast pocket, and his white dress shirt underneath added to his dashing appearance. In place of the typical tools a conjurer would carry, Elijah had crafted a unique black 2-part band that he wore on his index and ring fingers. These bands were connected by a thin black chain, giving him a slightly gothic aesthetic. He had also recently acquired a more stylish pair of glasses. With a clear intention to find a girlfriend, he took immense pride in his appearance, even though he grumbled that he would always be in Art's shadow. Art responded with a helpless shrug, inwardly noting to express his gratitude to his parents for their genetics at a later time. Studying both Elijah and himself in the mirror, Art contemplated the significant physical transformations they had undergone. The nerdy image of Elijah from 2 years back had vanished, replaced by a more polished and suave appearance that curiously contradicted his personality. Regarding his own reflection, Art observed his sapphire-colored eyes, which held a mesmerizing glow. These eyes stood in contrast to his fiery auburn hair. The alignment of bluish eyes and reddish hair struck him as remarkably coincidental. How improbable was it that his coloring would correlate with the two fundamental elements he excelled at? His facial features were gentler than Elijah's, exuding a blend of kindness and elegance, which projected a sense of serenity. Observing his own face as if it belonged to someone else, Art examined his features. Even after inhabiting this body for 12 years, he hadn't entirely grown accustomed to his appearance, particularly when compared to the rather ordinary countenance he had possessed in his former world. "Are you confident you made the right decision, Art, opting for the scholar-mage path? I was convinced you'd go for battle mage like me," Elijah commented while he groomed his hair. His straight black hair was now shorter and neatly combed to the side. "The only reason you wanted to be a battle mage is because you thought they have more attractive girls," Art retorted, playfully slapping Elijah on the back and flashing a mischievous grin. "Shut up. Just watch. The new and improved Elijah is going to become a heartthrob and find a girlfriend who'll make you green with envy. He adjusted his blazer, casting a final glance at his reflection. Clearly satisfied with his appearance, he strolled toward the door. Art trailed behind, Sylvie perched atop his head. Her tiny claws sank into his scalp, prompting a fleeting concern that he might reach the academy with small bald patches. "Took you guys quite a while to get ready. Who are you both trying to impress?" Art's mother playfully scolded, wagging her finger as Tabitha, donning an apron matching Art's mother's, chuckled. "Good morning, boys. Eat up quickly. Lilia will be on stage for the orientation as part of the student council. She's probably feeling anxious now, so make sure to support her." Tabitha chimed in, taking a seat across from them alongside his mother and Ellie. "I see you're both wearing the necklaces I gave you," Art remarked, his mouth still occupied with oatmeal and fruit. "Why wouldn't I? It's such a splendid piece of jewelry. I wish your father had even half the sense Art does." His mother sighed, her fingers idly toying with the phoenix worm ornament. "All my friends are so envious because it's so pretty. Make sure to get me more things like this, okay, brother?" Ellie leaned forward in her chair, her excitement palpable. "Sure," Art replied with a nonchalant tone, his mind quietly calculating the potential cost of something like the pendant. Aunt Alice? Would you mind healing my face before we head out? I don't want my grand entrance at school to be spoiled by these cat scratches." Elijah directed his gaze toward Sylvie, who responded by sticking out her tongue. "Still sparring with Sylvie?" His mother's lips curved into a smile. "Come here and let me take a look at that." She extended her hand toward Elijah's face, murmuring a soft incantation until a faint glow emanated from her fingertips. After a few moments, the minor scratches on his face vanished, prompting a contented sigh from Elijah. "Thanks, Aunt Alice." He leaned back in his chair and resumed his breakfast. Art's father hurried into the room, sweat trickling down his forehead, a clear sign of his recent training session. "Sorry I'm late for breakfast. I was in the midst of a minor breakthrough." He settled into a chair with eagerness, his gaze moving between Elijah and Art. "Wow, my two boys are ready for school already. Can't believe it. Seems like we've done a good job raising Arthur, don't you think, honey?" His broad smile filled the room. "What do you mean, we? I was the one who brought him up," his mother retorted playfully, offering him a teasing grin. "I suppose my parenting duties only come into play when they find themselves in trouble," his father quipped, raising an eyebrow. "As long as you're aware," his mother responded in a matter-of-fact manner, prompting laughter around the table. The only absentees were Vincent and Lilia. Lilia had commenced school a few days earlier due to her responsibilities with the student council, while Vincent's schedule had grown increasingly hectic. He had taken on a role in the management committee for the ship, Decathius, which was embarking on its voyage today. "You know, I'm still amazed that you chose to enroll as a scholar mage, Art," his father remarked, a sentiment he had shared numerous times before as he wolfed down his eggs. "Both paths have their merits, but in the grand scheme, battle mages are the ones who often reap the accolades," Tabitha sighed. Lilia, in defiance of objections from both Tabitha and Vincent, had chosen the path of a battle mage. They had hoped Lilia would opt for the safer route of becoming a scholar mage, but her determination to carve out a name for herself was unshakable. "I'll still squeeze in some general mana battling classes whenever I can to keep my skills sharp, but I agree, there's not much more for me to learn about combat tactics." Art chuckled. "Not much to learn. If any of your fellow students overheard that, they'd probably challenge you, although I doubt they'd stand much of a chance." Elijah laughed at the mental image of the potential carnage if someone dared to challenge Art. "Please control yourself, Arthur," his mother interjected, her expression tinged with concern. "Some very influential families have their children attending that school. It wouldn't do to create unnecessary conflicts and cause complications for Tabitha's family." "Don't fret. I'll make sure not to beat people up excessively." Art saluted, his mouth full of oatmeal while Sylvie helped herself to the fruits mixed in. His mother shook her head in mock disapproval, but his father chuckled. A maid entered the room, bowing respectfully. "Mr. Arthur, Mr. Elijah, the driver advises that we leave now if you intend to make it to the orientation ceremony on time." "Very well. Let's head out," Elijah said after quickly finishing his ham and greens. He stood, adjusting his black blazer as he did so. Art got up and approached his mother and Ellie, who were seated at the table. "Mom, Ellie, before I go, I need you both to show me your index fingers." His mother looked puzzled but extended her index finger, and his sister followed suit without hesitation. With a touch of mana, Art pricked his own finger and then lightly poked theirs, causing a droplet of blood to appear on each digit. "Apply the blood to the necklaces," he instructed, his tone carrying an air of seriousness that caused them to comply without a word. Placing their index fingers against their respective necklaces, the droplets of blood from their fingertips were immediately absorbed into the jewels. "These necklaces are now attuned to you, ensuring that only the two of you can wear them. They'll serve as a safeguard in case Dad or I aren't around. But remember, keep yourself safe while I'm away, all right?" He embraced each of them tightly, his sister's eyes welling up with tears. He shared heartfelt hugs with his father and Tabitha, his father's arms enveloping him with strength. "Take care, boys, and don't worry about us," his father reassured. "Visit whenever you can, and keep in touch," his mother chimed in, releasing them from her embrace. "Goodbye, brother. Goodbye, Elijah. Stay safe," his sister called out as they descended the stairs. "Your luggage is loaded in the carriage at the back," the driver informed them with a bow, holding the carriage door open for them. "To Xyrus Academy we go." Elijah raised his finger to the sky as if issuing a command before stepping into the carriage. Gazing back at his former residence, he stepped into the carriage destined for his new one, his face adorned with a smile. The journey to Xyrus Academy wasn't overly lengthy, given that it was situated within the same city. However, upon arrival, the grandeur of the sprawling campus and the time taken to enter through the main gate were quite apparent. A plethora of opulently decorated carriages were present, some double the length of regular ones, drawn by lower-ranked mana beasts. "Typical display of excess," Elijah muttered with a disapproving expression, observing ostentatious students alighting from carriages, their weapons ornamented to signify their conjurer or augmenter status. Although their carriage boasted a certain level of luxury from a commoner's perspective, it paled in comparison to the lavish carriages of prominent families that were meant to draw attention. "We've reached our destination, Master Arthur, Master Elijah." The driver opened the carriage door, ushering them out into the open. Inhaling deeply, both young men familiarized themselves with the campus air. The air's the same as always. Thought it'd taste better," Elijah commented, smacking his lips with disappointment. "Don't be ridiculous." He playfully pushed his friend forward as they joined the stream of students walking along the gleaming marble path. Suddenly, Elijah's astonishment was evident as he craned his neck almost vertically to behold the colossal structure ahead. The vast white edifice was adorned with etched runes across its surface, a sight that left even him momentarily spellbound. "Let's proceed inside," Art stated, snapping Elijah back to reality. They joined the flow of fellow students, all embarking on their first experience within the halls of the prestigious academy. Entering the building, Art winced at the overwhelming volume of noise. The clamor of thousands of excited students conversing filled the air, some reuniting with friends they'd arrived with, while others mingled with new acquaintances. "Let's find a seat!" Though Elijah stood right beside him, he had to shout to make himself heard. Eventually, they secured seats toward the middle of the auditorium, positioned toward the back. Taking a more attentive look around, he was taken aback by the number of dwarves and elves scattered about, engaging in animated discussions with those around them. "Wow, these are real elves," Elijah exclaimed, his eyes darting around as he seemingly scouted for potential romantic interests amidst the gathering. Shaking his head at his friend's antics, though not entirely surprised, he couldn't help but view these students as somewhat akin to children. As Art's gaze wandered aimlessly, he eventually focused on the stage, which remained unoccupied save for a solitary podium. Abruptly, a blurred figure sharpened into the recognizable form of Director Goodsky, positioned behind the podium. The last time he had encountered her nearly 4 years prior, she had sported the signature oversized hat that was customary for conjurers. Now she wore an elegant white circlet that matched her robe, emanating an air of refinement that starkly contrasted the witch-like image he had initially formed. Her eyes remained closed, yet when they slowly unveiled, they seemed to fix directly upon him, sending an unexpected shiver down Art's spine. A smile graced her features as she raised her hand deliberately, her unwavering gaze still locked with his. Amidst this, more of the incoming first years began to take notice of her presence. Conversations grew louder, and some even erupted into cheers. However, as Director Goodsky's hand reached the level of her head, an uncanny hush engulfed the surroundings, rendering even the most fervent chatter mute. Casting his eyes around, Art observed a universal expression of astonishment etched onto every face. Although lips moved, no audible sound escaped any member of the audience. "Excuse me for my rudeness, but I do hate speaking loudly. It's not good for my throat, not good at all." Her voice, pleasant and soft yet oddly penetrating, resonated through the auditorium. Even from his position in the back row, her words were clearly audible, commanding the attention of all. The assembly hall was filled with anticipation as Director Goodsky's voice carried through the air, addressing the gathering of future leaders, scholars, and potential powerhouses of Decathlon Academy. "Please allow me to extend a warm welcome to all of you," she began, her demeanor approachable and humble. "I am Cynthia Goodsky, or simply Director Goodsky. Feel free to approach me on campus and say hello. Today I won't burden you with a lengthy and self-congratulatory speech. My purpose is to introduce the student council that, alongside me, plays a crucial role in the decisions of this academy. Join me in giving them a warm welcome." With a wave of her raised hand, the council members proceeded to step forward. First to emerge was Jared, exuding confidence as he walked with a determined gaze. His handsome appearance triggered a high-pitched chorus of excitement from the female students, transforming the prior silence into a sudden surge of noise that could be likened to cats brawling outside a window in the dead of night. Following him was a cheerful figure, radiating an infectious playfulness as he waved to the audience, his grin lighting up the stage. "Look, there's Lilia. Let's give her a proper welcome." Elijah sprang to his feet, his voice reverberating throughout the hall as he urged his classmates to join him in cheering. Art followed suit, adding his own voice to the mix as they both yelled Lilia's name. Despite the impossibility of singling out their voices in the crowd, the two friends channeled their enthusiasm to support Lilia, who walked gracefully to the center of the stage. With gentle bows in every direction, she acknowledged the audience's reception, her usually reserved nature overshadowed by the spotlight of the moment. Following Lilia was a tall figure, his long bangs meticulously parted. His face held a stern expression, and his gaze appeared to look down upon everyone, creating an air of pomposity around him. Although the applause for this student wasn't as thunderous as it had been for Jared or the cheerful council member, he walked with an air of confidence that indicated a well-practiced poise. Finally, the arrival of the last council member hushed the crowd into a collective silence. Gunmetal silver hair caught the auditorium's lights, creating an ethereal halo around her as she glided across the stage with regal composure. Her peaches and cream complexion elicited admiring glances from the young men nearby, and as she turned to face the audience, her round turquoise eyes seemed to cast a bewitching spell over every boy present. Could she really be just 13? Art's mind struggled to process what his eyes were witnessing. Tess, whom Art couldn't think of as being anything other than a kid, had matured enough to catch him off guard. Her face still contained a childish innocence, but the way she carried herself made Art doubt that this was the same girl he had known since he was little more than a toddler. Tessia, taller than Lilia but shorter than the serious-looking young man beside her, projected an aura of authority that transcended her height. Her posture exuded a sense of presence that made her appear larger and more commanding than anyone else on the stage. Offering a deep bow, she gracefully adjusted her hair behind her pointed ears, her expression as neutral as a porcelain doll's. "I am Tessia Erilith, and it is my privilege to stand here as the Student Council President of this academy," she announced, her voice carrying a calm authority that resonated throughout the room. Tessa's entrance had an instantaneous impact on the ambiance within the entire building. As she bowed and introduced herself, an eruption of applause filled the room, students expressing their admiration through cheers. Beside Art, a scrawny human boy eagerly leaned in to speak to his friend. "That's Princess Erilith right there. My brother told me she's been on campus since last year, learning directly under the director, and now she'll be officially joining us this year." He attempted to keep the conversation hushed, but his enthusiasm caused his words to carry more than he intended. "That means she's the first non-human to step foot on this campus. Wait, She's just a first year and she's already the student council president? Can that even be real? The boy's voice, growing in volume with each word, carried the conversation to everyone around, making their discussion an unintended public affair. Yeah, I've heard about her too. Apparently she's some kind of prodigy, replied his friend. She's unbelievably gorgeous and talented. This is just unfair. I'm curious about what it would take to get her attention. The crowd buzzed with chatter about Tess, the boys fantasizing about her as an unattainable star while the girls mixed admiration with a touch of envy. Sylvie, atop Art's head, reacted frantically upon recognizing Tess on stage. Q! Dad, it's Mom, down there, let's go say hi! Sylvie's excitement had her bouncing up and down. Art responded by lifting her into his arms and holding her close. Who's your mama? Art sighed, conceding to her enthusiasm. Ever since hatching, Sylvie had developed a strong attachment to Tess, and it seemed her feelings were leading to some rather unconventional titles, Mama now included. Whoa! Elijah, whom Art had momentarily stopped paying attention to, grabbed his arm tightly with both hands, as if seeking physical support to prevent him from collapsing. Whoa, he repeated, his reaction contrasting with his intelligence in a rather peculiar way. You holding up, Elijah? Art nudged his head playfully, but it bobbed around like a bobblehead doll. Art, I think I'm in love. Elijah suddenly let go of Art's arm and hooked his arm through his, apparently lost in an imagined world where Art was Tess. This is getting a bit ridiculous. Sylvie, a little assistance, please? Responding promptly, Sylvie clamped her jaw onto the top of Elijah's head. He yelped, more from surprise than pain. Oh, sorry. Elijah released his hold on Art's arm, allowing Sylvie to hang there, and shifted his attention back to the stage below. As the crowd gradually quieted down, allowing Tess to resume her speech, Director Goodsky disappeared from the stage without a sound. Tess delivered her speech with an eloquence that even surprised Art. At just 13 years old, she possessed a commanding presence that managed to captivate the entire crowd. Her words, though straightforward, carried an air of maturity that demanded attention. She spoke about the core principles of the academy, highlighting its role as a sanctuary where students should feel secure and unburdened. Tess underlined that any student who caused harm to another outside of a consensual duel would face severe consequences, her voice unyielding and determined. As a fellow first year, I have had the privilege of being part of this academy for an extra year. During that time, I've become acutely aware of the entrenched discrimination against scholar mage students. I, for one, will not tolerate any form of hostility or bullying rooted in the superficial distinction between scholar mages and battle mages. Her words stirred a ripple of restlessness among the crowd. Everyone in attendance had heard the whispers about the challenges faced by scholar mage students. The uniforms and advanced courses will continue to be different. Starting this year, general education courses containing both scholar mage classes and battle mage classes will be mandatory for the first 2 years to foster stronger integration of students in both focuses and allow you the opportunity to build relationships with your battle or scholar mage counterparts. After the 2 years are up, students may choose to switch their education specialization by taking a test, although it will be quite a difficult one. This last declaration prompted a murmur of discontent from the assembled students. While Art and Elijah had secured admission through a unique connection with Director Goodsky, most students, regardless of their background, had to undergo testing to determine their placement as either scholar mages or battle mages. For the scholar mage pathway, an incoming student was required to possess only a basic grasp of magic, primarily focusing on mana manipulation. While a written examination gauged their intellectual capacity, the practical segment of the assessment was relatively straightforward. On the other hand, aspiring battle mage students faced a considerably more rigorous practical examination. They were expected to demonstrate foundational spells or techniques, contingent on whether they pursued conjuring or augmentation. Although this might have appeared uncomplicated for individuals like Elijah, Tess, or Art, it was acknowledged that those newly awakened to their magical abilities could find it genuinely challenging. The imposing figure of the tall student took the stage next, his commanding presence silencing the crowd with a mere gesture of his hand. See that guy? He's the eldest son of the Graves family, the boy seated next to Art informed him, attempting to keep his voice low. Unfortunately, His whispered advice ended up as audible commentary, defeating its intended subtlety. My name is Clive Graves, and I hold the position of your Student Council Vice President. As Tessia, our president, aptly stated, this academic year will usher in several significant changes. Beyond the newfound flexibility to transition between scholar and battle mage paths, adjustments will also be made to the graduation requirements. In the past, the completion of a 4-year tenure at the academy was the main criterion for graduation. Yet, it has become increasingly evident that the proficiency of many graduating mages falls below the desired standards. To address this, the Academy's leadership has mandated that graduation from Xyrus Academy will now hinge not solely on attendance, but on the attainment of specific benchmarks in successful passage of a graduation examination. While the criteria for graduation have been considerably elevated, the Academy is affording students a generous 10-year span to fulfill these requirements. During this period, our earnest aspiration is to nurture and produce exceptional mages proficient both in theoretical knowledge and practical combat skills. We extend a warm welcome to all, be it humans, elves, or dwarves, to the halls of Xyrus Academy. Clive concluded his address with a bow, followed by the rest of the student council joining in. The final segment of Clive's announcement wasn't particularly novel to any of them. Though it had been recently revealed, its timing led Art to speculate whether it might be linked to the uncharted continent. Could the Academy's intensified emphasis on generating high-caliber mages be attributed to preparations for potential future conflicts with their newfound neighbors? After the ceremony concluded, the newly inducted students were directed to their respective dormitories. As they streamed out of the auditorium, Art's gaze inadvertently sought out Tess, but she was conspicuously absent. Outside, the walkways lined with trees formed a leafy archway, casting a colorful cascade of autumn leaves. The atmosphere was abuzz with the excitement of students engaging in animated conversations, eager to acquaint themselves with their fellow peers. Progressing deeper into the campus, en route to the dormitories, a cluster of female students passed by Art and Elijah. Some of them glanced back at the two boys with a hint of surprise, followed by giggles shared among their companions. Elijah let out a resigned sigh. It's like my attractiveness just vanishes when I'm standing next to you. He walked with a slightly deflated posture, while Sylvie, perched atop Art's head, patted Elijah's head consolingly. Art couldn't help but chuckle. Don't worry, my friend. Even if most of the attention comes my way, a few might eventually settle for you, right? Elijah's response was a playful jab to Art's stomach, followed by shared laughter. Screw you, he said with a grin. A sudden loud explosion jolted both Art and Elijah, as well as the students in their proximity. The commotion appeared to be originating from the far end of the marble walkway. Exchanging a swift look, the two friends sprang into action. I can't fathom how a dwarf as short as you even dreams of being a proper augmenter. You're better off sticking to your blacksmithing for the real warriors like me, came a scornful voice. What the hell did you just say? Who do you think you're talking to? Retorted another voice, equally heated. From a distance, Art discerned the situation and halted his run, shaking his head in understanding. It seemed to be a confrontation between two students, marked by unnecessary posturing. The explosion had resulted from a human student striking a nearby tree with a mana-boosted punch. Elijah glanced around, concern furrowing his brow. A few of the nearby students were actively avoiding the unfolding confrontation. Having been among the last to exit the auditorium, most of their peers had moved deeper into the campus or returned to their dormitories. While the immediate area wasn't densely populated, the potential danger of a fight breaking out lingered, endangering any students caught in the crossfire. Surely they won't actually fight on the first day, right? Let's just avoid this, Art suggested, nudging his friend with the intention of guiding him around the scene where the two arguing students were. Elijah responded, Oh, come on. We don't have much else to do right now, just unpacking. Let's see what they've got. Look, the human appears to be a second-level augmenter. Both the dwarf and the human were donned in the uniforms of battle mages. The robust human had 2 stripes on his tie, indicating his level, while the dwarf sported just 1. Enough with the chatter, shorty. Announce the duel if you have the guts. I'm Nicholas Dryle, or are you just full of hot air? The human's lips curled into a confident smirk as he placed his right hand over the badge on his left breast. "Tch, you're gonna regret this," retorted the dwarf. Standing a head shorter than his adversary, his stocky frame appeared a bit awkward within the blazer uniform. However, the ease with which he carried his massive battle axe signaled that his capabilities surpassed what the single stripe on his tie might imply. "The duel is declared by me, Brosnian Boar, against Nicholas Dryle." The dwarf placed his hand on the metal badge attached to his blazer, his voice resonating with authority. Nicholas responded, "I accept the challenge." The badges on their chests glowed in distinct hues, gradually synchronizing until they emitted a resonant ping sound. These badges, along with the pocket watch emblem on the Scholar Mage uniform, served as the artifacts for the dueling system. They created an invisible barrier around each participant, capable of withstanding a certain amount of force. When one participant's barrier was breached, the duel concluded, and the other was declared the victor. After activation, the artifact required a full day to recharge for subsequent use, during which dueling was strictly prohibited. To maintain fairness, mages were forbidden from challenging those of a lower level, which explained why the human had resorted to taunting the dwarf into initiating the duel. The human mage retrieved a pair of dual swords from his dimension ring and assumed a combat stance. Onlookers began to cautiously step back, aiming to avoid being inadvertently drawn into the impending clash. Elijah's enthusiasm burst forth. "Go, Braz!" he cheered, his encouragement met with some disapproving glares from the crowd. Art focused on the two augmenters before him. The human, at level 2, stood as a red core stage mage, whereas the dwarf remained at the black stage. The upcoming battle promised to be intriguing. A resounding bellow escaped the human student as his two broadswords started emanating a faint yellow glow, causing the earth beneath him to tremble. "Yah!" The dwarf leapt into action, propelling himself forward by leveraging a nearby tree. With an earth-imbued charge, he empowered his massive battle axe for the impending confrontation. "Both are Earth attribute augmenters, Art!" Elijah's excitement grew as he leaned in for a closer view of the unfolding fight. Meanwhile, Sylvie had nestled herself on Art's head, already asleep. "Tremor smash!" the dwarf called out, his left palm pressing onto the head of his axe, causing a subdued glow to coalesce. With a thunderous roar, the dwarf's strike sent the human hurtling backward, despite his attempt to defend with both swords. The human's arms trembled, his face marked by a grimace. Lowering his swords, the human student charged toward the dwarf, who had assumed a defensive posture. The twin swords scraped against the ground as he closed in, and as he swung them upward, streaks of earth followed their path, forming twin earth blades after each weapon. "Shatter!" The dwarf's form emanated a yellow glow as he forcefully stomped his right foot onto the ground, generating a ripple that shattered the incoming earth blade into fragments. While managing to block the human's two actual blades with his axe, the dwarf suffered a minor scrape on his arm from the upward swing. "Earth pillar!" exclaimed Nicholas the human. Continuation from the upward slash, he forcefully stomped his leading foot directly in front of the dwarf, summoning a brittle column of rock from the ground. This rocky pillar struck the dwarf directly in the stomach. "Oof!" The dwarf was propelled upward by the impact, his shield fracturing with a resonant shattering noise, signifying the duel's conclusion. Amidst the crowd of onlookers, cheers erupted from the humans, but the dwarves in attendance expressed their collective disappointment with audible groans. Elijah let out a resigned sigh and began to turn away. As Art prepared to follow him, he caught a faint smirk on the human's face as he once again infused mana into his twin blades. That fool wasn't intending to conclude it there. He aimed to deliver the decisive strike. Art weighed his options. If he directly intervened, his face would become recognizable to everyone. However, using a long-range technique to halt the human's action could potentially exacerbate the situation. He felt exasperated by Elijah's failure to discern the human's intent of casting another spell. It would have been more fitting for Elijah, a conjurer, to thwart the spell. Yet there existed another approach. Art sighed internally, feeling apologetic toward Tess. "Is that the student council president?" He projected his voice deliberately louder than needed, aiming to startle the human. This sudden exclamation prompted the human to hastily sheath his swords back into his dimension ring, his gaze shifting anxiously as he searched for the approaching president. The audience that had been observing the duel, dissecting its nuances and engaging in discussions, now began scanning the vicinity for Tess. Elijah craned his neck above the crowd, searching for her. "Where is she? I can't spot her anywhere." "Oops, must have been my mistake," Art replied casually, turning to walk away. However, a firm hand clamped onto his shoulder, stopping him in his tracks. "Are you trying to provoke me, kid?" It was Nicholas, the human who had been in the duel. "Yeah, what the heck, dude? You got our hopes up for nothing." A wave of disappointment rippled through the crowd. Art had evidently underestimated the extent to which the students here idolized Tess. "I thought I glimpsed her. My apologies," Art said as he peeled Nicholas's hand off his shoulder, giving him a playful wink. "You better be sorry." Nicholas yanked his hand away and spat on the ground by Art's feet before walking off. "You know, a bit of advice if you want to graduate? Killing that dwarf boy wouldn't have done you any favors," Art remarked calmly, Sylvie managing to spit directly at the back of Nicholas's neck. In a swift motion, Nicholas spun around, his swords once again in hand. A visibly throbbing vein adorned his forehead, giving him a cartoonish appearance. Art emitted a sputtering sound, quickly realizing the inappropriateness of laughter in that moment. Casting a brief glance backward, he noticed Elijah shaking his head, understanding that laughter wouldn't help now. "You dare?" The 13-year-old boy, struggling with oversized swords that didn't match his still-developing body, lunged toward Art awkwardly, his intent to strike with both blades in a cross-chop. His face was flushed red with anger. Art arched an eyebrow, raising his hand to halt the impending blow. But before he could shatter the boy's swords, a voice sliced through the tension, halting the boy in his tracks. This voice was familiar to all the new students, the same voice that many had likely become enamored with not long ago. It was also the voice of Art's childhood friend. "Do you dare?" The boy's face visibly drained of color, his body frozen by the unmistakable voice that had interrupted the scene. Turning around, Art spotted the entire student council making their way toward them. The students who had gathered around quickly parted, creating a pathway as if royalty was passing through. Leading the group with composed yet brisk steps was Tess, her serene face devoid of emotion. Behind her, Art noticed Lilia, who cast him a concerned look. The boy who had confronted Art promptly withdrew his swords into his dimension ring and offered a respectful bow to the approaching council members. Sweat glistened on his forehead. "What is happening here, Arthur?" Jared was the first to break the silence, prompting raised eyebrows and surprised murmurs from the observing crowd. "Seems like the scholar mage knows someone important," someone in the crowd whispered. "No wonder he was acting so arrogantly just now." "Huh, did you see him trying to stop the attack with his bare hand?" Art rolled his eyes at the whispers rippling through the crowd. Despite their noble backgrounds, he had expected a certain level of decorum from the preteen students. "Not much happened, but you might want to check on the dwarf student over there. Brosnian, I believe." Art pointed toward the tree where the groaning dwarf still held his stomach. Elijah approached, aiming to ease the tension. "Hello, Lilia. Apologies. Things got a bit heated after their duel concluded. No real harm done." He waved slightly toward Lilia, though his words were meant more for Tess, whose demeanor remained impassive. "Nevertheless, this student was on the verge of attacking you without declaring a duel. That's a serious violation," Lilia intervened, her expression stern as she pulled out a small notebook to jot down notes. As Lilia, Jared, and Elijah discussed the incident, Tessia's unwavering gaze bore into Art, almost as if she expected him to take some specific action. Yet, even with his extensive life experience, Art found himself uncertain about the appropriate course of action in this particular scenario. "What does she want from me? Should I treat her as the student council president? As a childhood friend? Should I keep our past hidden?" A flurry of questions swirled in Art's mind as he grappled with how to respond. "Mama's here!" Sylvie's excited cue came from atop Art's head, prompting him to firmly instruct her to stay still and not approach Tess. Meanwhile, the crowd grew increasingly rowdy, with boys jostling to catch a better glimpse of Tess. I believe I asked you a question. Do you dare?" Tess took a step forward, her intense gaze fixed on the second-year student. Initially, Art had thought he held a higher level than Tess, but when he noticed the neatly tied ribbon beneath her collar, he saw that it bore 2 stripes as well. "No. I would never dare to violate the rules in that manner. I only intended to intimidate the boy. I had intended to stop before my weapon could make contact. Still, I recognize my own rash behavior, and I offer my apologies, the student stammered, giving Art a menacing look before bowing to Tess. Leave. Tess's gaze remained steady as the student retreated, quickly distancing himself before disappearing from sight. Several boys from the crowd followed suit, likely those who had instigated the entire confrontation in the first place. And you, what possesses you to incite a confrontation with a senior student on the very first day of school? Do you not understand your position? Regardless of his behavior, he remains your senior, and he adhered to the rules during his duel. Were my words about the tensions between scholar mages and battle mages lost on you? Yet here you stand, fostering conflict with a fellow battle mage student on your very first day. Tess folded her arms tightly, her stern gaze penetrating Art, her complexion turning either red from anger or embarrassment. Art couldn't discern which. What? Art wasn't entirely certain he had heard her correctly. He narrowed his gaze and took a step forward. Elijah's eyes widened in alarm as he realized that Art was about to cross a threshold. Forgive me if I am mistaken, but it appears you are delivering a reprimand based on your interpretation of the last few moments of this situation. Are you truly in a position to lecture me right now? Art took yet another step forward, observing Tess's haughty demeanor begin to crack. He was on the brink of causing grievous harm, or potentially even killing Brosnin over there, all after the duel had concluded. If I hadn't intervened with that conceited fool, you would have had a homicide on your hands, not an unsanctioned altercation between two students, Art pressed on, his voice carrying more volume than he had initially intended. However, I do offer my apologies for the disturbance I've generated, Student Council President, he added with an icy edge, leaving everyone, Tess included, taken aback. Upon turning away, an unwelcome knot of guilt formed in Art's throat. He had just scorned the students for their immaturity, yet he found himself acting no better. He realized he had forgotten that Tess was just a 13-year-old girl, even though he had held expectations of her behavior that he couldn't even meet himself. Elijah kept pace behind him as Art walked away, his pride preventing him from looking back. What an auspicious reunion. Wait a moment, first year. Clive Graves sprinted toward Art, gripping his arm in an attempt to swivel him back around. Were you raised in a cave? Are these the manners your mother taught you? Do you even comprehend who you were addressing? Pausing but holding his ground, Art halted and glanced back at Clive. From their first encounter, Art had sensed they would never be on good terms, but Clive's words managed to rankle him more than he expected. The insinuation that he had been raised in a cave, a veiled insult to his mother, struck a nerve. Let go. The venom in his tone caught Elijah off guard, prompting him to instinctively step back. Clive promptly released Art's arm, retreating while conjuring a defensive mana barrier. Art let out a dismissive snort and continued walking. Elijah hastened his steps to reach Art's side, matching his pace. You realize what you've done, right? You seem to have a knack for attracting trouble. First the dungeon, and now this, he muttered, shaking his head. He remained by Art's side, wordlessly conveying his support. A wry smile tugged at Art's lips at the irony that his history with Tess remained unknown to everyone. But then guilt surged within him once more, twisting his emotions. He had likely been too harsh on her. No, he definitely had been. She was just a young girl, and his patience had worn thin in that moment. He regretted losing his temper simply because she had acted her age. As guilt consumed his thoughts, Art gave his cheek a light slap, resolving to let things unfold naturally. After all, that usually proved to be the best approach in relationships. Despite his frustration, he wasn't truly angry with her. His patience had merely run thin. Reconciliation was necessary, but he sensed that timing might be an issue. Elijah and Art successfully reached their assigned dormitory building without encountering any more issues. The Academy's accommodations consisted of separate male and female dormitories, each divided into sections for underclassmen and upperclassmen. Students would transition from the underclassmen dorms, where they took their general education courses, to the upperclassmen dorms once they had chosen their specific area of study. The underclassmen dormitories were utilitarian, to put it plainly. Though they were impeccably maintained and tidy, they lacked ornamentation or flair. The interior bore a comforting beige hue, and staircases led to the upper floors. A narrow corridor stretched across each level, lined with doors leading to individual rooms. "Here we are, room 394, Elijah announced with a grin. He activated the door's mechanism by placing his hand on a circular stone above the handle. This seemingly basic artifact was designed to detect and respond to simple mana signatures. Upon entering the room, Sylvie promptly dashed inside, proceeding to arrange a cozy nest on one of the beds. The room presented a more modest ambiance compared to the Helsty Manor, but it exuded a distinct sense of comfort. Upon entering, their gaze was drawn to two closets on the right side. On the left, a compact bathroom was equipped with twin sinks, a shower, and a toilet neatly arranged in a snug space. Two beds, separated by a nightstand, adorned the left wall. On the opposite side, a lengthy dresser provided storage for folded garments. Dividing the sleeping quarters from the study area was a waist-high partition, accessible via 3 raised steps that led to an arrangement of desks and sofas. Positioned against opposing walls, the desks encouraged separate study sessions, while a substantial couch ran along the low partition, demarcating the desk zone from the bed area. The far wall, primarily composed of glass, held an irresistible allure. Through it, a panoramic view of the campus unfolded, painted in the rich hues of autumn. Observing the scene from this vantage point, one might never have guessed that this was a haven for mages. Seating himself on the couch, Art found himself quite enthused about the days ahead. Sylvie cozied up against the window, gazing out at the captivating panorama. "Ah, we haven't even had dinner yet, but I'm already exhausted. I wonder whose fault that is," Elijah playfully exclaimed, hopping onto the bed just behind the couch, the one Sylvie hadn't chosen for herself. Art allowed himself to slide sideways until he was reclining on the couch, his body sinking into the cushions from the weight of fatigue. His gaze turned distant as he stared out through the window, observing the sky, until his attention was snagged by the heap of luggage cases that the driver had delivered earlier. Emitting a sigh of reluctance, he averted his gaze, as if by ignoring them he could postpone the inevitable hours of unpacking. Tess threw her face into her pillow, letting out a muffled scream of frustration. "I messed up big time. I messed up. I messed up. I messed up. I totally screwed up." The weight of regret pressed heavily on her chest as she clutched the pillow in her hands. The reunion had been meant to be a heartwarming and emotional moment. Yet it had gone awry in the worst possible way. Why had she allowed her anger to take control of her words? She knew Arthur well enough to understand he wouldn't start an argument without a valid reason. "I'm such an idiot," she groaned into the fabric, her heart racing with unease. Her thoughts circled the events like a whirlwind. She berated herself for her impulsive outburst. The situation could have been different if she hadn't let her frustration dictate her words. Still, she justified her reaction by recalling that he bore some responsibility for the chaos in the crowd. "He's probably furious with me now," she muttered, her voice muffled by the pillow. Tess's mind replayed the scene over and over. She questioned her choice of words and her decision to bring up the speech. Amid the confusion and her own feelings, she remembered the fact that Arthur had ignored her presence, even after she had intervened to help diffuse the situation. Why couldn't he have just said hi? She mused aloud, her tone tinged with frustration. I wasn't expecting a grand welcome or anything. A simple long-time no-see Tess would have sufficed. Her thoughts shifted to the dark-haired stranger who had been with Arthur. She couldn't help but wonder about his identity and his connection to Arthur. Were they friends? Best friends, perhaps? The two of them seemed to share familiarity with Lilia and Jared. Tess's frustration continued to build. Gah! This whole thing is so exasperating! A frustrated scream into her pillow failed to alleviate Tess's agitation. Her room seemed to close in on her as a knock on the door disrupted her reverie. It's Clive! A muffled voice reached her ears from the other side. I've come to check on you. Are you all right? Tess cleared her throat, hastily pulling herself together. I'm fine, thank you. She adopted a detached tone, a facade she often employed to create distance. Clive's concern extended beyond mere pleasantries. Who was that first year who had the audacity to speak to you like that? You were simply trying to offer advice. Should I report this to the director? He could face consequences for his behavior. Tess's patience waned, and she interrupted sharply. No need. Let it go. And don't involve the director. Consider it in order. Her words bore a stern edge, an intentional intensity to convey her point. How dare someone criticize Arthur? Only she had that right. She collapsed onto her pillow, the sound of receding footsteps echoing in her ears. The dormitories had undergone a reorganization, transitioning from segregation by student type to gender and class level. As student council members, they enjoyed individual rooms within a building adjoining the director's office. While sharing a residence with guys could be uncomfortable, the presence of Lilia and generally decent male companions made it bearable. Frustration coursed through Tess's thoughts like a wildfire. Arthur's image burned in her mind, his fiery auburn hair crowned by the perched mana beast, Sylvie. Despite the distance, his distinct appearance had been unmistakable. Sylvie's evolution from hatchling to dragon hadn't shocked her. Nothing Arthur did surprised her anymore. Her frustration subsided into resignation. Blaming Arthur felt futile, recognizing he likely wanted to shield their relationship from the spotlight, given her position. Yet why was he always so obtuse when it came to matters of the heart? Dummy, she muttered in exasperation. I hope he doesn't hate me. Tess had an array of questions she yearned to pose to Art. Curiosity buzzed in her mind. What has he been up to all this time? How did his life as an adventurer unfold? Has he suffered any injuries? Did he miss me? The 4 years of separation had accumulated countless inquiries within her. The urge to showcase her progress surged through Tess as well. She longed to impress him with her growth. I've come so far, she thought, a sense of accomplishment swelling within her. Training diligently under the tutelage of Director Goodsky had yielded remarkable results in her conjuring abilities. She mulled over the thought that she could have pursued training with Grandpa, but that notion had its limits. Being an augmenter, his expertise didn't align perfectly with her needs. Nevertheless, he had laid her foundation in mana manipulation. However, the director, well-versed in the intricacies of the conjurer's journey and attuned to the variations between elves and humans, had crafted her training with precision. Recognizing Tess's immense potential, Grandpa recalled the incident when her latent power had erupted, resulting in an implosion that razed her room and a portion of the kitchen below. The memory was intertwined with the period when Art had been a part of their household, a time during which Tess had the task of rousing him from slumber each day. Fighting against the emotions bubbling within her, Tess felt her nose tingle as she sniffled. She admonished herself, realizing that crying wouldn't mend the situation. She questioned whether Art would truly resent her for that incident. A sense of urgency overcame her as she determined to rectify the situation with an apology. Doubt gnawed at her, however. Would he simply disregard her attempts to make amends? A mixture of frustration and sorrow led Tess to curse under her breath as she wiped away another tear. Art watched idly as Sylv took a nap beside him on the couch, her tiny body rising and falling with each breath. It's not like you to explode all of a sudden like that, though, Art, Elijah said. He was still lying in his bed, his hand propping his head up as he faced Art. Well, I admit I shouldn't have exploded, but I couldn't help. 2 brisk knocks interrupted their conversation, and Elijah jumped up and headed to the door. That's strange. Who would want to see us on the first day? Maybe our neighbors are coming by to say hello. Art heard the click of the door opening. Who is it? Art asked when he realized no one was talking. He turned to see Elijah frozen still. He got up to see what was going on and saw Director Goodsky standing nonchalantly at the door, smiling at him. Good evening, Arthur. Elijah. May I come in? Director Goodsky, it's an honor to meet you in person, Elijah exclaimed, his bow stiff and slightly comedic, followed by a quick recovery that almost resulted in dropping his glasses. Cynthia Goodsky, ever graceful, smiled politely, the crow's feet around her eyes adding to her charm. Please come in, Director Goodsky. Elijah, stop blocking the doorway, Art said, pulling out the chair from his desk and motioning for the director to take a seat on the sofa. I told you. Call me Cynthia, she remarked, casting a stern look towards Art as she glided past Elijah, her connection with the ground seemingly minimal. She settled onto the couch, and as she did, the door closed on its own, a display of the remarkable harmony she held with the wind element. The air almost seemed to bend to her will without requiring a command. I don't think it would be wise for a 12-year-old with no background to be on a first-name basis with the director of the most prestigious academy in this continent, Art mentioned lightly, taking a seat on his desk chair, while Cynthia sat cross-legged on the couch cushion, her posture impeccable and formal. My goodness, Your bond certainly has changed in appearance since the last time we met. Intriguing, Cynthia remarked, extending her hand towards Sylvie, who evaded her touch and instead nestled on top of Art's head. As shy as before, I see, Cynthia mused, giving Sylvie a final thoughtful glance before shifting her attention to Art. How peculiar. I only sense wind and earth attribute mana inside you. Are you using a seal by chance? She tilted her head slightly. Elijah maintained a rigid posture behind her, akin to a soldier in the presence of a commanding officer. In response to her question, Art raised his left arm, revealing the bracelet with 2 dangling charms. It was his way of answering her inquiry. Can't say I'm not disappointed. I was hoping to go around flaunting you as my little quadra-elemental protege, but I guess even a dual elemental augmenter is rare enough. I'm glad to see you've opted to be a scholar mage, as I expected, Cynthia said with a soft laugh. I was planning on paying a visit to your office to update you on some things, but your coming here saves me the trouble, I guess. I've probably made an enemy from a not-so-friendly family while I was an adventurer, so I don't want to give him any reason to suspect me, at least not right now, Art stated, leaning back in his chair, his focus on the charms hanging from his bracelet. Yes, I've read the reports about the case between Adventurer Note and Adventurer Lucas Wykes. Quite a troublesome foe you've managed to acquire. Since they are a military house, I do have a certain amount of authority over his family, but they have too many hidden workings that continue to elude us, Director Cynthia mused, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. It's fine. I don't consider that an urgent matter. He's just a chore I'll have to get around to finishing someday. If I do something rash now and it blows back to my friends and family, that's when it will be a problem. I would actually like your help with another matter, Art explained, leaning forward as he addressed Director Cynthia. Please speak, she responded. I want to take the higher-level mana theory classes, especially those on deviance, Art stated plainly. That wouldn't be too difficult to do. But Arthur, wasn't one of your main reasons for attending this academy to fit in with your peers? Cynthia scrutinized him, awaiting his response. I don't mind taking these classes on top of my normal ones, where I would be with students my own age. I'm just impatient to learn a bit more about deviant mana manipulation, since I've hit a ceiling on that recently. Art caught himself just in time, almost blurting out, since there was no deviation magic in my old world. All right, I can make that happen. I can even give you a pass so you can observe the upper-class top mages' mock battles as well, Cynthia offered, her tone generous, yet Art eyed her with a touch of suspicion. Okay, so what's the catch? Art raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in his tone. Arthur, I'm heartbroken. I only wanted to do this for your growth, Cynthia exclaimed dramatically, placing a hand over her heart as if genuinely offended. Art, you're being rude to the director. Elijah's voice sounded slightly panicked, not being able to see Cynthia's facial expression. Art smiled at her, waiting silently for an answer. Good Sky sighed. Very well. Of course, I believe it's only fair to receive some compensation for doing these kinds of favors for you, she stated, baffling Elijah. I hope you don't suggest something absurd, like joining the student council, Art responded, shaking his head. I heard about your little bout with the princess earlier, Cynthia said with a laugh, causing Art's face to turn slightly red. I didn't expect the ever-calm and composed Arthur Leywin to explode like that. I guess your relationship with Princess Aerolith really is a special one. Intrigued by the sudden revelation, Art watched as Elijah approached them, a mixture of confusion and curiosity evident on his face, even though he maintained his standing position. Likely as a sign of deference to the director, Art could sense Elijah's eagerness to understand more about the situation. Cynthia, seeking Art's unspoken approval, glanced at them briefly before redirecting her attention to Elijah. With a nonchalant shrug from Art, Cynthia proceeded to unveil the intriguing information, her lips curled into a mischievous grin, resembling that of a teenager divulging juicy gossip. Coincidentally, your closest friend happens to share a long history as childhood companions with our charming student council president, she revealed, her tone laced with playful amusement. Art couldn't help but observe Elijah's jaw-dropping reaction. A cascade of emotions played across his features, from stunned disbelief to a hint of feeling betrayed, intermingled with a touch of envy. Struggling to string together coherent words, Elijah stammered, What? His attempts to make sense of the unfolding scenario were reflected in his fragmented sentences, each word a testament to his bewildered state. Turning their attention away from Elijah's flustered response, Art refocused on Cynthia. An inquisitive tone colored his voice as he addressed her. I'm curious. How did you come to know about this? While I'm not surprised by your awareness, stumbling upon such a specific piece of information seems more than just a random occurrence. With a smile playing on her lips, Director Cynthia revealed, Virian Aerolith is an acquaintance from years past. I kept your existence under wraps, but I couldn't resist sharing the news with him that my academy was soon to welcome a talented quadra-elemental mage. We've had a long-standing rivalry, but his composed reaction raised suspicion. It wasn't until his granddaughter arrived to be mentored by me that I pieced the puzzle together. The anticipation of a humorous reveal danced in the air as Cynthia struggled to suppress her laughter. The reason for her mirth remained elusive to the listener, Arthur Leywin. He could only shake his head in a gesture of surrender, his complexion deepening in hue with a mix of anticipation and embarrassment. When will Arthur Leywin grace this institution with his presence? Cynthia mimicking a youthful Tess by elevating her tone. Despite her imposing facade to the world, here she was, indulging in a youthful fit of laughter, finding amusement in his chagrin. Elijah's curiosity seemed to surge, his eagerness palpable, yet restrained by the director's presence. His urge to pry answers from Arthur was evident in his gaze, a silent insistence that held back due to Cynthia's lingering presence, an inhibition that she would likely have welcomed without qualms. Putting the puzzle pieces together, Cynthia's thoughts crystallized. It's quite a revelation, Arthur. To think of you being trained by Virian, it feels a touch like betrayal, she confessed, arms crossed, a sigh escaping her lips. At this juncture, Elijah had surrendered, having settled into his desk chair, his resolve seemingly worn thin. Arthur, Cynthia continued, her tone carrying a note of understanding. She holds you in high regard. I'm certain her intentions weren't to cause such a spectacle. The training regimen she endures under my guidance is demanding. Previous aspirants faltered, unable to keep pace. Yet she perseveres, driven by her aspiration to measure up to you. It's possible, Arthur, that you acted impulsively. The chastisement was unexpected, a disappointed maternal tone taking hold. Admitting his immaturity, Art sighed, allowing himself to recline further into his seat. Yeah, I'm aware of my foolishness. No need to remind me, he conceded. Cynthia's demeanor softened, a gentle smile directed at Art. Will you mend things with her soon? I'd rather not witness my pupil disheartened during her training, she inquired with care before transitioning. But there's something else I seek from you. Not a role in the student council, but involvement in a new committee that's launching this year, the disciplinary committee. Anticipating her intention, Art foresaw the request. His head shook resolutely. Let it go. I can manage without the theoretical lessons. I'll study from the library's books on my own, he asserted. Cynthia's response came measured and composed, dismantling his alternative plan. The materials covering deviance are restricted to upperclassmen, and they're accessible only to those who can demonstrate their deviant status, an option currently unavailable to you, she clarified with a tranquil tone. Pursuing logical discourse, Art questioned the rationale behind his involvement in the disciplinary committee. How does it align? I'm a newcomer here as a scholar mage. What impression would that leave on the other members? He inquired, hoping to find reason in the exchange. Cynthia's confidence remained unshaken, her gaze resting on Art's mana-sealed bracelet. Although initial approval might be lacking, I believe that given time, your ability to change their perspectives will become apparent, even in light of your self-imposed limitations, she asserted, nodding toward the bracelet, a smile gracing her lips. Her determination to proceed was unmistakable. In contrast to the student council members, who underwent selection based on broader criteria, the disciplinary committee's composition hinged solely on strength, a distinction that set Art apart. The committee's responsibilities were notably lighter compared to those of the student council, and being part of it would offer Art the chance to collaborate with fellow students, some of whom were also deviants, all accomplished in their respective fields. Her reasoning grew more persuasive. As Art began to voice his doubts, Cynthia interjected before he could finish. No, Lucas Wykes will not be part of the disciplinary committee if that's your concern. Art, this is an opportunity that any other student would consider an honor. I strongly urge you to embrace it, she pressed, her demeanor shifting to a more earnest expression. Engulfed in thought, Art inclined his head, pondering the situation. Juggling regular classes, extra commitments, and the prospect of committee work weighed heavily on him. He mulled over the implications, recognizing that such involvement would inevitably infringe upon his private training, the location of which he still kept hidden. As though divining his thoughts, she presented her final proposition. Given the additional workload alongside classes and personal study, I'm willing to sweeten the deal. I can grant you access to a private training facility, ensuring no intrusions. She gestured toward his bracelet. Please, Art. I genuinely believe this arrangement could be mutually beneficial in the long run. Her sincerity softened her countenance, a touch of earnestness emerging. Pondering how inclusion in the disciplinary committee might align with his plans, Art found no inherent drawbacks to accepting the proposal. After a brief contemplation, he replied, "All right, I'll join the disciplinary committee." His shoulders eased as he released a sigh. "Excellent. With classes commencing tomorrow, I'll forward your adjusted schedule to your first period instructor," she informed, retrieving a custom uniform from a dimensional pocket and tossing it to him along with a sheathed knife and strap. "Here's your new uniform. I had it prepared in anticipation of favorable news. The knife is a symbolic emblem of the disciplinary committee, though it does hold some value, so take care not to misplace it. Additionally, there's an outerwear component," the director appended, "but you'll need to have it properly tailored." The notion that she had this arrangement prepared beforehand, even if it was just a contingency plan, irked Art somewhat. A realization struck him. Considering both his former life and his current one, both Grandpa Virion and Director Goodsky would still be older than him. He recognized that even in combining his two existences, he was still eclipsed by individuals with more experience. Lost in the novelty of his dual lives, he hadn't considered that there were individuals with greater wisdom. Although he retained an advantage over the conventional mages here, thanks to the more advanced magical practices from his original world, he acknowledged that older mages native to this realm possessed their own advantages by virtue of being attuned to its mana-rich environment. In a way, even with the gift of 2 lifetimes, someone wiser was inevitable. He involuntarily dismissed these thoughts, and Director Goodsky quirked her head inquisitively. "Now that the matter I arrived to discuss is settled," she began, "I shall take my leave. Enjoy your first dinner here, and please do make amends with my dear Tessia as swiftly as possible. I wouldn't want my precious disciple to linger in despondency." Her departure was as ephemeral as a passing breeze, leaving him to ponder why she hadn't entered the same way. He presumed it was a gesture to uphold their privacy. The moment Director Goodsky departed, a looming shadow cast itself over him. Lifting his gaze, Art met the scrutinizing stare of Elijah, his features etched with astonishment. The intensity in his eyes was equivocal, leaving Art unsure whether he was about to engage in conversation or opt for a more confrontational approach. "You've got some explaining to do," Elijah finally uttered, his voice a blend of intrigue and possible confrontation. With a cautious touch, Art patted Elijah's shoulder. There, he consoled with a sigh. Even Sylvie, the little creature perched on his head, seemed to empathize, fluttering down and nipping at Elijah's scalp to rouse him from his daze. Elijah's anguished gaze remained fixed on Art as he shifted his head. A whisper of protest escaped his lips. "Not fair," he mumbled, his voice heavy with frustration. "What?" Art leaned in, his curiosity piqued, encouraging him to speak. Drawing nearer, Elijah's lips almost brushed against Art's ear, his words a breath away. "It's not fair, damn it!" he breathed, his exhalation tingling Art's senses. Caught off guard by the proximity, Art yelped and instinctively recoiled, his ear ringing from the intensity. "What the hell? Don't shout in my ear!" he exclaimed, flinching as he rubbed his pinky in his ear canal, attempting to wipe away the droplets Elijah had unintentionally sprayed. Elijah's frustration was evident as he vented his thoughts. "Looks, talent, even luck with the girls. Why do you have everything?" His hands landed on Art's arm, his face etched with intense contemplation. Baffled by this unexpected action, Art inquired, "What are you doing?" The confusion laced his voice. "Trying to see if I can absorb some of your Arthurness," Elijah mumbled, his focus unwavering. Art's exasperation simmered. "Are you out of your mind?" Shaking his head, he swatted Elijah's hands away. Despite Art's response, Elijah's grip remained firm on his arm, drawing quizzical looks from passing students as they made their way to the dining hall. En route to the dining hall, not far from the dormitories, Art briefly recounted to Elijah how he had encountered Tess, though Elijah loathed when he referred to her by that name, in the forest of Elshire. While narrating the tale of his time in the kingdom of Elenoir's castle with Tess and his instruction in mana manipulation by her grandfather, Art sensed that the account was failing to alleviate Elijah's mood. "Have you ever considered the attractiveness of dwarves, Art?" Elijah inched uncomfortably close as they walked together. Caught off guard, Art questioned, "What's this about?" Elijah brushed aside the queries with a dismissive gesture. "Just humor me for a moment. I'm trying to paint you a picture of how tough things were for me." Rolling his eyes, Art played along. "All right then, how attractive are dwarves?" Elijah's response was matter-of-fact. "Not at all," he stated unequivocally. "The dwarven standards of beauty are polar opposites to those of humans, Art. Even though I grew up in their kingdom, I'll never truly understand their concept of attractiveness." A chuckle escaped Art. Curiosity piqued about what constituted beauty among dwarves. "Really? Enlighten me about the hardships of your life." Elijah's expression shifted, the memory evoking a shiver. "When I turned 8, my grandfather, the elder who raised me, introduced me to someone he hoped would become my future wife. The entire week before that, he was going on and on about her beauty and grace. But when she arrived, Art, I swear I thought I was staring at a man." The recollection sent a tremor through him. "Her name was Helgarth, and let me tell you, she had me fearing for my virtue," Elijah exclaimed, a touch of exasperation coloring his tone. He had grabbed Art by the shoulders and was shaking him, but Art couldn't help but burst into laughter. All right, I understand." Amid his chuckles, Art managed to speak. "You were a young lad deprived of normal experiences and hit puberty much too early," he summarized, a grin on his face as he tried to contain his mirth. Elijah's frustration remained palpable as he spoke, his words punctuated by a shake of his head. "You grow up surrounded by sturdy women who strut around displaying their bulging muscles, and then tell me how you'd react when confronted with regular girls." His shoulders sagged, a sense of resignation in his posture. Art's brow furrowed as he pondered Elijah's words. "Wait, shouldn't those sturdy women be considered regular girls to you? I mean, you were raised among dwarves from a young age, right?" he countered. Elijah's retort was swift. "Just because I lived among dwarves doesn't mean that was my only exposure. I was always aware of how I looked different from them, so I couldn't fully trust their idea of beauty," he explained, his voice tinged with a mixture of nostalgia and skepticism. Art shook his head gently. "Well, you're now a student at the most esteemed academy on the continent, specializing in battle magic. You've got to showcase your abilities. It's inevitable that someone who meets your high standards will notice." Elijah let out a resigned sigh, a touch of humor underlying his words. "Your sympathy is almost painful," he remarked, a smile playing on both their lips. The topic transitioned as he turned his focus towards Art. "I have to say, I prefer your new uniform. It gives you a sense of strength and makes you appear somewhat unapproachable," he said, his agreement emphasized by a firm nod. The uniform provided by Director Cynthia didn't stray far from Art's previous scholar mage attire. A white dress shirt featured a lone black stripe positioned above the elbows, and a light gray vest matched with dark gray pants completed the ensemble. However, the vest and pants were crafted from distinct materials, and intricate engravings concealed within them hinted at potential protective qualities. On the breast pocket's place was a strap crisscrossing his chest, securing a sheathed silver knife above his heart. A gold string adorned his collar in lieu of the previous red one, lending an air of regality to his overall appearance. Gazing downward, Art released a sigh. He had to admit the uniform did possess a certain charm, even if he wasn't particularly fond of ostentatious clothing. His curiosity now centered on what the accompanying coat might look like. Shifting the topic, Elijah adopted a more serious demeanor. "So what's your plan regarding the disciplinary committee?" he inquired, prompting Art to tilt his head in bemusement. "What do you mean?" Elijah's shoulders lifted and then dropped in a casual shrug. His gaze remained forward as they neared the dining hall. "I mean, you're in this new committee, but are you really going to put your heart into it? It sounds like a significant commitment." Art considered the question thoughtfully. "You're right. The director asked me to join this committee, but the specifics haven't been clearly laid out," he began to explain. "I'll certainly give it my best effort. Since I've committed to it, I might as well give it my all. Plus, Ellie is going to enroll in this academy in a few years. I want to pave the way, make things smoother for her when she arrives." As they entered the dining hall, the murmurs of students blended with the savory scent of cooked meat and fragrant herbs, offering a warm welcome. As they entered the hall, a hush seemed to sweep over the room, the collective attention of students fixated on them. Braving the weight of stares, both unkind and curious, they proceeded to the food line, their destination a secluded spot in the back corner. Elijah couldn't resist a smirk, his gaze dancing around the room. "Seems like you're already quite the sensation, Art," he observed, plucking a piece of roasted meat with his fork. With a feigned air of arrogance, Art raised his head slightly. "What can I say?" he quipped, a shared laughter erupting between them. Concealed within a pocket of his new uniform was a note from Director Cynthia, bearing instructions that Art perused as they dined. Between bites of meat, Elijah interjected with a mouthful, "Oh, and don't forget we've got the club rush tomorrow morning." Art's response was laden with a sigh. "Right. The auditorium early tomorrow. It's mentioned here that the disciplinary committee's official announcement precedes the club rush," he noted, his focus shifting to his vegetables. He attempted to offer them to Sylvie, who promptly declined the leafy greens. "That means you'll be meeting the rest of the disciplinary committee. How thrilling. Just make sure to wake me up before you head out," Elijah mused. "Sure thing," Art replied, skewering a piece of roasted meat for himself, only to have Sylvie intercept it midair. During their meal, they delved into discussions about potential clubs Elijah might consider joining and the classes they were enrolled in. A revelation surfaced. The disciplinary committee convened every morning, a prospect that mildly unsettled Art. It seemed his long-standing habit of erratic sleep patterns would finally be challenged. Apart from the daily committee meetings, Art's schedule comprised morning classes, fundamentals of mana theory, practical mana manipulation, and basics of artificing. Post-lunch, his more advanced courses commenced. Deviant Magic Theory 1, Team Fighting Mechanics 1, and Spell Formations 1. The autumn semester offered an array of upper division courses for Battle Mage students, while spring semester classes catered to a broader range of Scholar Mage students. Clubs oriented toward upper division members convened prior to lunch, considering their evening classes, while the reverse held true for underclassmen. While most students opted for a manageable course load of 3 or 4 classes each semester, Art found himself weighed down with nearly double that number. His schedule was brimming, the last class of the day concluding at 7 in the evening, rendering him devoid of any available time for extracurricular pursuits. Elijah's course lineup had some overlap with Art's. They shared the class fundamentals of mana theory, while his other classes encompassed basic chain casting and mana utilization 1. Between mouthfuls of food, he pondered potential club choices. Maybe I should join a hand-to-hand fighting club. I've heard more conjurers are seeking competence in close-range combat, just as a precaution. Art nodded, his thoughts echoing a similar sentiment. My father mentioned the same thing. Some conjurers are interested in learning close combat skills, though I'm not entirely sure how that would be integrated. He briefly considered why he still felt hungry despite his empty plate, then realized that his consumption of meat had been minimal, courtesy of Sylvie's pilfering ways. She now perched contentedly on his head, emitting satisfied noises. Throughout their meal, a background awareness persisted that conversations revolved around them, with occasional glances shot their way. However, no one had approached them until this moment. A cluster of students garbed in Battle Mage uniforms approached their table, seemingly disregarding Art's presence entirely. Among them, the leader stood tall, his wavy brown hair parted down the middle. Extending his hand toward Elijah, he introduced himself as Charles Ravenpour II, a member of the illustrious Ravenpour family. Confidence radiated from him as he assumed that Elijah would readily accept the offered gesture. Being with someone beneath your status, huh? Elijah's mischievous grin emerged, punctuating his words. You know, I'm extending my courtesy today by allowing you to join our company. The gesture was coupled with a self-assured jut of his chin. One of the followers chimed in, reverent admiration in their tone. It's truly an honor to be part of the Ravenpour group. Elijah adopted an expression of feigned bewilderment, turning to Art. The Ravenpoop family? Can't say I've come across a family named after bird excrement. What about you, Art? The playful inquiry was met with a stifled laugh on Art's part. I must confess, the Ravenpoop family doesn't ring a bell, and well, I'd be mortified to be affiliated with a family bearing such a name, even if I were familiar with them. Art chimed in, subtly masking his amusement. The exchange drew chuckles from nearby students who had been eavesdropping on the conversation. How dare you mock a prestigious family like Ravenpour House? Charles slammed his fist on their table, emphasizing his name, which only seemed to incite further laughter from Art and Elijah. I am a second-year student who should be shown respect. I reached out to you, a newbie, because I didn't want a battle mage student to lower himself by being with scholar student trash, but instead you spit in my face like this? His hand twitched, the urge to reach for the wand strapped to his right leg evident. Elijah maintained unwavering eye contact and retorted, First of all, he's a scholar mage student. Arthur is just as much a mage as any battle mage student. Second, why would I go with someone who blatantly looks down on my best friend and roommate? Third, it's obvious you're not here out of kindness toward me, but because of hostility toward Arthur, so stop your childish show and go piss off. Art had to admit that when his friend assumed a serious expression, combined with his naturally sharp features, Elijah did exude a considerable aura of formidability. Issuing duels inside a facility not designed for battle was prohibited. Employing magic within the dining hall would lead to severe consequences. However, these regulations seemed to hold no sway over Mr. Ravenpour. A swirling of wind enveloped him as he struggled to rein in his anger. "Jack!" he roared. The gust settled as one of his followers stepped forward, a boy with the visage of a 13-year-old, but a physique that appeared much older. "Show these brats how things work around here," Charles growled, edging away. Jack displayed a hint of hesitation, but Charles assured him of proper compensation. At this, Jack's expression transformed into a malevolent grin, slipping on a pair of clawed gauntlets. "Sucks for you," he sneered, cracking his neck before splitting the table in two with a swing of his gauntleted fists. By now, the dining hall had descended into a hubbub, with students gathering around, some even clambering onto the tables for a better view. Elijah's hands flew up in surprise, shielding his face as the table shattered into fragments. Art, however, remained composed, seated with legs crossed as he calmly took a sip from the cup of water he held. Sylvie had dozed off beside him. "Are you crazy? This is a dining facility," Elijah shouted, rising to confront Jack, who flexed his clawed fists. "Don't matter. Boss is going to take care of everything anyway. Keep your teeth clenched now," Jack retorted, his right fist emanating a glow of non-attribute mana. A second-year student, as indicated by the two stripes on his black tie, Jack's core still boasted a dark orange hue even without a specific elemental attribute, quite impressive for his age. Elijah's right hand shimmered, two rings emitting a subdued yellow glow as he readied a spell. However, Art observed that Jack's menacing intent was aimed at him, not his friend. Maintaining a lowered gaze, Art prepared to resolve the situation swiftly, but before he could act, tendrils of vines surged from the ground, ensnaring Jack in his grasp. It only took a couple of moments for the vines to completely encase Jack. As he struggled to break free, the vines twisted tighter, turning his face an ugly shade of purple. While most were confused, Charles seemed to know exactly what was going on. His face paled, and he immediately stepped away from the commotion he'd created. Elijah was surprised as well, his head turning left and right to see who had cast the spell, but the person responsible had yet to show herself. Standing up, Art faced the suffocating Jack, who'd stopped struggling against the vines. The atmosphere in the dining hall was tense as everyone waited silently for the perpetrator of the spell to show up. Giving Elijah a meaningful glance, Art silently lifted his arm, placing his palm on the vines as he released his torrent spell. Carefully controlling the amount of mana he used, he willed a sharp gale of wind from his palm. The Ravenpour groupies behind Jack covered themselves against the blast of wind as they were caught in the attack. Art freed Jack from the vines that were choking him, but in the process, he shredded his clothes as well, leaving him the same way he had come from his unfortunate mother's womb. Jack plopped to his knees, coughing and gasping for air. With neither a word nor a change in expression, Art turned and walked toward Charles, who was discreetly trying to make his way out of the dining hall. He was by the wall, almost in front of the main doors, when Art unsheathed the disciplinary committee knife he'd received from the director, imbued wind mana into it, and threw it. The knife cut through the air and pierced his blazer, pinning him against the wall. "What the hell?" he yelped as Art came face to face with him. "Maybe it's just me, but I find it pathetic when brats from noble families like you beat your chests about something you never even earned. Before bragging about how powerful your family is, at least be competent enough not to embarrass them." With one swift gesture, Art pulled out the knife Charles was struggling to remove. Then he walked through the door and left, not looking back. The brisk autumn air greeted Art as he closed the door, his breath becoming visible in a cloud in front of him. "It's Mama!" Sylvie's head shot up from her perch atop his skull. Ignoring his bond, he looked up at the night sky, illuminated by countless stars as he spoke. "You know, you could have killed him if I hadn't disrupted the spell." Just a few yards away to his left, the familiar voice responded. "I was going to cancel it once he passed out. Besides, I know you were going to handle it." "Oh, now you leave it up to me? What stopped you from doing that this morning after the ceremony?" Art snickered. He walked toward the figure leaning against the wall of the building, her features masked by the shadow of the starry night. By her silence, he could already picture what sort of troubled expression she wore. He stood in front of her, close enough to see her face, but she was looking down so he could only see the crown of her silvery gunmetal hair, which shimmered in the moonlight. "Ahem," Art coughed awkwardly, covering his mouth with a fist. The silence between them felt like an eternity. Finally, she glanced up, revealing her face as she fiddled with her hands behind her back. "I'm sorry, ow!" The awkward atmosphere instantly dissipated as they headbutted each other in their attempts to bow an apology at the same time. Art burst into laughter as he rubbed his throbbing head. "I think I heard my skull crack just then." "Shut up." Tess massaged her head too, but she continued to look down. Then her shoulders began trembling, and Art heard a sniffle. He leaned forward to see his childhood friend's face. "Tess, are you crying?" Art teased, gently wiping her tears with the inside of his sleeve. It's because it hurts," she sniffed, avoiding his eyes but not moving away from his touch. "Did it hurt that much?" He softened his voice as he stood back up, carefully running his fingertips over her head, checking for a bump. "Yes, it hurt a lot." She smacked his hand away, then buried her face in his chest, wrapping her arms around his waist as she began crying in earnest. The seconds seemed to elongate as Art felt her body tremble with her erratic breaths and hiccups. He looked back at the night sky, feeling his face burn as he clumsily returned her hug. "I thought you hated me," she said, her voice muffled in the fabric of his shirt. "Even if there are times when I get mad at you, I would never hate you, Tess," Art said softly. I don't want that either," Tess admitted. "Don't want what?" "I don't want you to get mad at me," she mumbled. "Well, this time I was in the wrong. I shouldn't have lashed out at you like that." Even now, having barely reunited after years apart, Art recognized that he treated Tess differently than everyone else. He didn't usually find reasons to get angry with most people, besides perhaps his family and Elijah, but it was like his emotions ran closer to the surface when Tess was around. Even in his old life, he hadn't been good at handling these types of situations. "No, I was wrong too. I shouldn't have called you out like that in front of all those people, but I have to be the strict student council president in front of everyone, you know?" She looked desperate as she finally raised her face to his. Her eyes were red and a little puffy from crying. Footsteps thudded from behind Art, and Elijah called out, "Art! You should have seen everyone's faces after you! Oh my heavens!" Elijah abruptly stopped as he spotted who Art was with. Art gave him an embarrassed look, realizing that Tess was still wrapped tightly around him. "I'll see you back at our dorm," he said quickly, then darted off, nearly tripping over his own feet. "Tess, I think you should probably let go of me now." Art smiled as he watched her face turn crimson. "Oh, right." She immediately released him, taking a step back as her gaze shifted down, too embarrassed to look at him. Art had to chuckle a little. His childhood friend really hadn't changed. "Do you want to take a little walk with me?" He gave her a smile as Sylvie jumped from the top of his head into Tess's arms. "Cue!" "Long time no see, Mama." Every stride he took exuded an air of self-assuredness, a confident rhythm that seemed to epitomize his unwavering sense of purpose and direction. Was it the manner of his walk that held such allure? His eyes, serene and composed, yet tinged with a hint of playful mischief, cast a captivating spell. Was it the depth of his gaze that drew her in? And that smile, radiant even in the dimness of the surrounding night. What was it about that smile? These thoughts occupied her mind as she tried to fathom the source of her infatuation. Why was she so irrationally attracted to him? After all, he was just another boy, albeit an exceptional one, accomplished, well-mannered, and undeniably handsome. That should be the extent of it. So why did she find herself acting so foolishly in his presence? Why did she repeatedly subject herself to moments of embarrassment whenever he was near? Her exasperation escaped as an involuntary sigh. Is something the matter? His concerned gaze fell upon her, his gentle voice sending a quiver down her spine. "No, everything's fine," Tess responded with a nervous laugh, her cheeks reddening once more. To divert her attention and mask her embarrassment, she began to pet Sylvie more vigorously. Oh, how frustrating. Tess could sense his gaze on her, his eyes seemingly studying her as they walked along the marble path. The moon's gentle glow filtered through the canopy of trees that stretched over the walkway. Their encounter earlier in the day had been brief and marred by unfortunate circumstances. In reality, it had been almost 4 years since they had last crossed paths. While Tess was tempted to return his gaze, she knew that her own face would betray her with a deep blush. So she kept her eyes fixed on the ground. She couldn't help but wonder if he regarded other girls with the same intensity. She wished he didn't. Tess desired his attention solely for herself, just as she was experiencing now. As they strolled along, their conversation delved into the events of the past few years. His tales of adventuring held an allure, although she couldn't shake off a hint of disappointment upon learning that he had been accompanied by Jasmine during much of that time. The edges of Art's eyes crinkled as a soft laugh escaped him, unveiling his radiant smile. "What?" Tess instinctively lifted Sylvie as a shield in front of her. "Just enjoying the various expressions that play on your face as I narrate my stories," he playfully remarked. A quick glimpse into his eyes and her cheeks flamed once again. This was becoming absurd. Despite Sylvie's warmth, Tess would have felt the chill if not for the comforting creature. Yet Art didn't seem affected by the cold at all. She couldn't help but flush at the memory of how tightly she had clung to him for warmth earlier. He radiated a pleasant warmth, though. As their conversation flowed, Tess felt herself gradually easing into a more comfortable state. She shared fragments of her training under Grandpa, but placed a greater emphasis on the teachings of Grandma Cynthia. "You address her as Grandma?" Art's head tilted, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Tess nodded in affirmation. "Yes," she insisted. "Since I'm her sole disciple and she doesn't have any children, she wanted me to call her that." "Interesting," he mused, his expression reflecting his thoughts. Encouraged, Tess continued to recount her experiences, outlining the rigorous training she had undergone. She detailed the challenges she faced in enhancing her plant attribute magic due to the scarcity of reliable instructors. Manipulating plant attribute mana was a rare skill even among the elves, and there was a paucity of individuals skilled in plant magic. While a few noble lineages possessed the potential for it, they often opted to concentrate on mastering other elemental magic, leaving plant magic relatively unexplored due to its complexity. Tess observed the sincerity in Art's expression as he responded, "So you're proficient in both plant and wind magic? That's impressive. I had a feeling you'd have remarkable talents." His genuine admiration stirred a sense of pride within her. While she was accustomed to receiving exaggerated compliments from various significant individuals, it struck her how his straightforward praise had an unexpectedly profound effect. Art continued, his words carrying a genuine tone. "It's no wonder Director Goodsky took you under her wing." The dorms were closer to the dining hall than Tess would have preferred, leaving her with a wish for time to halt as they neared their destination. She couldn't shake off the sense that they should be situated on the opposite side of the school grounds. "It's getting late, and tomorrow is a significant day. We should both rest." Art's voice was gentle as he touched her arm briefly, leaving a sensation akin to fire attribute mana on her skin. She found herself yearning for that contact to linger a little longer. "You're right. Oh, and congratulations on becoming a member of the disciplinary committee." She managed to smile, although her predominant emotion was the regret that their walk had ended so soon. Art's grin was accompanied by Sylvie repositioning herself atop his head. "Thanks." As he turned to head towards his dorm, Tess watched his back, momentarily lost in thought. Unexpectedly, he reversed his steps just after a few paces. Art nearly overlooked it in his haste. Extracting an object from his pocket, he deposited it into Tess's hand. "Here, this should be of considerable help to you." Releasing her hand, he accompanied the gesture with a playful wink before pivoting towards the dormitories. Sylvie waved a small paw in her direction as they departed. Art didn't allow her a moment to express gratitude. Gazing down at her palm, Tess scrutinized the unassuming, lackluster green orb. Its unremarkable appearance held a profound significance for her, simply because it was bestowed by Art. Knowing his tendencies, it was improbable that this was some trivial bauble. A contemplative curiosity led her to infuse the orb with a trace of mana. The outcome caused her to almost drop it, her hands trembling in a nearly uncontrollable manner. This is... "Papa, you seem unusually cheerful. Is it because you patch things up with Mama?" Sylvie playfully taunted, accompanying Art as they ascended the stairs and returned to his dorm room. "Enough of that, Sylv, and quit calling her Mama," Art retorted, giving a playful pinch to his Dragonbond's ear, prompting her to wiggle. Tess and Art had taken their time, engaging in leisurely conversation and frequent pauses during their walk. Consequently, it was rather late when they arrived. Art approached the door to room 394 cautiously, anticipating Elijah might be asleep. However, the sight that greeted him was unexpected. A wide-awake Elijah, seated cross-legged and facing the door, his eyes marked with exhaustion. "Oh, so you're still up?" Art remarked with an awkward wave. "Hell yes, I'm awake," Elijah retorted, arms crossed as he used a nod to indicate Art's bed, signaling for him to sit. Releasing a helpless sigh, Art settled in, prepared for the forthcoming barrage of inquiries. "Go on," Art encouraged, bracing himself as his best friend unleashed his volley of questions. It was nearly 4 a.m. when he finally concluded his barrage of questions. The two of them were sprawled out on their respective beds, fatigue evident both physically and mentally. Sylvie, long since, had succumbed to slumber. "I can't believe you were hugging her," he uttered, head shaking in disbelief. "I already told you. I've known her since she was 5. It's only natural that she'd be more at ease around me," Art responded. Once again, he shook his head, his expression still one of incredulity. "After you left, I overheard some students conversing. Quite a few speculated that the president herself was behind that vine spell. Apparently, she's the only one with such adept plant magic skills. You know what they've started calling her?" Elijah sat up and locked eyes with Art. "No, what?" Art inquired, a touch of intrigue lacing his tone. Elijah leaned in, his voice hushed. "There were a couple of terms that seemed to circulate the most. First, the untouchable princess," he revealed. "Untouchable? Is she truly that much more powerful than everyone else?" Art inquired. Elijah, however, brushed aside the question. "And the second term, lunar goddess." Perplexed, Art queried, "Why lunar goddess?" He couldn't help but chuckle at the somewhat juvenile nicknames circulating about. "Imagine it, Art. The moon appears close enough to grasp, but no matter how you reach, it remains unattainable, and yet you managed to touch the moon. You hugged the moon." Elijah's arms flailed in an exaggerated gesture of defeat before he flopped back onto the bed. "Get some sleep," Art retorted, an amused smile playing on his lips. Fatigue had overtaken both of them to the point where even washing up felt like an insurmountable task. The mere thought of how drained he would be the following morning caused Art's head to throb. Despite his weariness, The night's events swirled through his mind, a constant replay of questions about his actions in the dining hall. It was a tendency he had carried from his time as a king, overthinking past decisions and ceaselessly planning for the future. In the adjacent bed, the sound of Elijah's steady breathing indicated he had already succumbed to slumber, his mutterings occasionally touching upon the theme of the moon once more. "Wake up!" Art slapped Elijah's stomach, his fingers deftly securing the shoulder strap that bore the emblem of his disciplinary committee membership. "Oof!" Elijah jolted upright, startled by the abrupt awakening, only to groan moments later as he was reminded of his fatigue and the aches in his body. "I can understand why you dislike being roused this way," he muttered, rubbing his stomach in discomfort. With a smirk directed at his friend, Art made his way to the door. "I'm heading out now, so hurry up and prepare. I'll meet you in first period." Without bothering to glance back, he waved and departed for the auditorium. The formal introduction to the other members of the disciplinary committee awaited him, and he felt a surge of anticipation to see who these individuals might be. Sylvie shared in his excitement, emitting an enthusiastic QA while swaying her head. Today marked the point when everyone would recognize his role in the disciplinary committee. Art's grin widened as he imagined the reactions of the Ravenpour group upon realizing the significance of his new uniform. Upon arriving at the auditorium, Art meticulously adjusted his shirt, vest, and strap, seeking to maintain an impeccable appearance. As he pushed open the door, he was overcome with a mix of weariness, drowsiness, curiosity, and a subtle thread of excitement. Upon unlatching the back entrance to the auditorium, Art was greeted by an unexpected and ear-splitting roar that whipped his hair back in its wake. Clinging tightly to his head, Sylvie managed to maintain her perch and avoid being dislodged. The colossal shout of the mana beast was accompanied by globules of saliva that rained down upon his face and upper torso. Guiding his actions through the onslaught of the creature's welcome, Art calmly wiped the beast's spittle off his face before nonchalantly patting its snout, which loomed just inches away. Standing at a formidable 6 feet tall on all fours, the creature boasted a dense dark brown fur coat, accentuated by a deep red mane encircling its head. Its jaw bore a pair of sharply pointed teeth, further heightening its aura of menace. Nevertheless, in comparison to Sylvie's formidable dragon form, this creature appeared as nothing more than an oversized kitten in Art's eyes. Even Sylvie displayed minimal interest in the mana beast's presence, contentedly resettling atop Art's head. Startled by the absence of surprise, Art's gaze shifted toward the source of the mana beast's call. Emerging from behind the creature stood a student, a few years his senior, distinguished by a mane of drab light gray hair that cascaded just over his brow. His eyes so narrow they resembled mere slits, crinkled in a smile that bore more mockery than warmth. Though his stature was lean and towering, he exuded an air of fragility. However, it was his attire that stood out the most. Unmistakably distinct from Art's and any other he had encountered, the newcomer sported a billowing dark gray kimono-style robe that enveloped his arms and extended past his waist. Black pants clung to his legs, while a golden sash cinched his waist. Partially concealed by his robe, the gleam of the silver knife, the hallmark insignia of all disciplinary committee members, caught Art's eye. An uneasy feeling gnawed at him as he regarded this figure, a sensation that bristled with wariness. The final member of the disciplinary committee had arrived, and his introduction came in the form of a fourth-year student named Kai Cresslis. His demeanor remained unchanged, eyes perpetually narrowed, lips curling in an enigmatic smile. He offered a subtle wave, his hands swathed in bandages, creating the illusion of gloved hands. "Hello, my name is Arthur Leywin. Pleased to make your acquaintance." Art extended his hand to shake the bandaged one that Kai presented. "Bah, another delicate pretty boy. Why aren't there more real men in this committee?" The sharp voice cut through the air, its origin easily discernible as Art's gaze sought out the speaker. In an instant, recollections of what Elijah had shared the day before at dinner flashed through Art's mind. Stepping forth from her seat, a robust female dwarf advanced toward Art. With limbs akin to sturdy tree trunks, she stood at a height barely reaching his chest. Amidst her masculine visage, only her flowing brown hair and high-pitched voice hinted at her feminine identity. "Well, looks like we'll be working side by side. Might as well make introductions," she boomed with an air of authority, her hand connecting with Art's back in a hearty thud that sent an electric tremor racing through his frame. "Arthur Leywin, pleasure to meet you," Art responded, massaging his stinging back. "Now come on then, follow me. The other DC officers are waiting in the adjacent room. Director Goodsky didn't provide us much in terms of details, so everyone's itching for curiosity," Doradria declared with enthusiasm, leading Art down a corridor. Kai trailed behind them, the mana beast in tow. "Everyone, assemble! Our final member has arrived!" Doradria's booming announcement echoed as they reached a room situated at the hallway's terminus. Inside the expansive chamber, a space undoubtedly intended for grand events, Art's attention was drawn to 5 additional figures assembled within. With a straightforward approach, he moved toward the group, extending a collective salutation. "Greetings to all. I am Arthur Leywin, a new scholar mage student here at the Academy. My elemental abilities lie in wind and earth manipulation." Accompanying his words was a brief bow. "Arthur Leywin?" The initial speaker sounded taken aback. Among the gathered individuals, a youth of around 17 caught Art's eye. His hair, the color of rich mahogany, was styled into bold spikes that somehow evoked the image of a lion's mane. Intense, sword-like brows crowned his powerful brown eyes, creating an arresting gaze. After a moment, Art recognized him. "If my memory serves me right, you must be Prince Glader," Art addressed, his confidence growing as he locked eyes with the young man. The more he scrutinized him, the more convinced he became that this was indeed Curtis Glader, the heir of Sapin's throne. Curtis's response carried a charismatic tone, layered with depth. His expression, however, seemed tinged with concern, likely due to the complications caused by his father's guards during their previous encounter. "Nice to see you again, Curtis. You must be a 5th year now, right?" Art's cheerful reply appeared to alleviate Curtis's troubled countenance. "Indeed. 5th year fire attribute augmenter and beast tamer. It's good to cross paths with you again," Curtis declared warmly as their hands connected in a firm shake. His uniform, distinct from Kai's relaxed kimono-style robe, exuded a more intricate design. It resembled an antiquated military ensemble, lacking only the cap. A black blazer adorned with dark gray accents and gold buttons adorned his frame. A military-style cord stretched diagonally from his right shoulder to his blazer's collar, lending him an air of refinement intertwined with strength. Realization dawned on Art as the mana beast, which had enthusiastically roared earlier, positioned itself behind Curtis. "Ah, I suppose that majestic lion is the one your father acquired at the auction a few years ago. It certainly gave me quite the welcome." "Did Kai use Grauder to startle you?" He directed a glance at Kai, who simply responded with a nonchalant shrug. "Yes. I remember you were present when we acquired him as a cub. We established an equals contract last year after he attained A-class status." Curtis's words carried a veneer of humility, but beneath it, Art could sense a strong undercurrent of pride that stemmed from being a successful beast tamer. This achievement was truly noteworthy, especially considering Curtis's ability to forge an equals contract with his beast rather than a more conventional master-servant contract. A careful observation revealed striking similarities between Curtis and his world lion, Grauder. Their hair and mane shared a comparable hue, and their fierce countenances seemed to mirror one another. "It appears your bond has evolved somewhat as well," Art remarked, his hand absently rubbing his chin. "Although Sylvie seems to be about the same size." While Art scrutinized Sylvie, who had dozed off atop his head, he subtly assessed Curtis's internal mana circulation. Notably, Curtis didn't exhibit the signs of assimilation, as the world lion's beastly will didn't appear to hold a significant influence over him. "Yeah, her growth rate seems oddly slow," Art remarked in a casual tone. Curtis's attempt to reassure him was evident as he said, "Don't let it trouble you. Despite the number of students bonded with beasts, true beast tamers with equals contracts are quite rare in the Academy." Changing the subject, Curtis continued, "You remember my sister, Kathleen, right?" The girl he indicated, with her petite figure and ebony hair, offered a silent bow of greeting. In return, Art executed a respectful bow. "Indeed, I recall. It's a pleasure to see you again." Kathleen had clearly inherited her mother's features. Her flawless porcelain complexion contrasted strikingly with her raven black hair, dark eyes, and long lashes, giving her an almost doll-like appearance. Her attire closely resembled her brother's, except for the skirt that reached just above her knees. Doradria appeared to be the only female student in the academy who opted for pants over a skirt. "Nice to meet you again, Arthur. I am a first year as well, entering as a Scholar Mage student. My specialization is in ice attribute magic." She introduced herself with a bow, her expression steady as stone. "Ah, so she's a deviant. Allow me to follow, though the order seems off. My name is Claire Bladeheart," spoke the charming young woman with chin-length scarlet red hair. Claire's uniform bore a military style, adorned with gold epaulets, ornamental shoulder pads on both sides. The upright, elaborately designed collar encircled her neck, and her light gray skirt and knee-high boots lent her uniform a regal touch, in stark contrast to my plain one. With the recent adjustments in the school's grading system, I'm categorized as a sixth-year battle mage student. I specialize in dual attributes, fire and wind, and currently hold the position of disciplinary committee leader. Similar to yourself, I'm an augmenter. If you have any queries, feel free to approach me. This upperclassman exuded positivity and fervor from every pore. The thought of donning a uniform like Curtis's or Claire's sent a shiver down Art's spine. While those outfits suited them well, he felt relief that the DC officer uniforms were tailored to each individual's preference, and he appreciated Director Goodsky's decision to keep his more straightforward. It took a moment for the familiarity of her name to click. "Are you by any chance related to Caspian Bladeheart?" Art inquired. "Indeed I am. Do you know my uncle?" She cocked her head to the side. "Not personally. I've heard many commendable things about Caspian Bladeheart's prowess from my father's former party members." Art's smile conveyed warmth as she acknowledged his words with a nod of understanding. "That's truly kind of you. My uncle commenced my training as soon as my abilities awakened, so some of my techniques bear resemblance to his. Naturally, I still have a long journey ahead, but I'm pleased you're familiar with his legacy." Her hand fell to the golden hilt of the rapier secured on her left side. "Long time no see, Arthur Leywin." A tall blonde elf a couple of years older than him approached, crossing his arms as he looked down at Art. "I apologize. Do I know you?" Art had no clue who this elf was. Then Sylvie mentally transmitted the information. "Ah, Feifei!" Art pointed at him in surprise. Feifei had grown considerably since he last saw him, towering over him by at least a head and blossoming into quite the handsome young man. Feifei's face immediately turned beet red, and he placed both hands on Art's shoulders. "It's Feyrith Ivsar Threed. I may be a first year like you, but I'm still a couple of years older, so don't use nicknames. I'm a water specialist conjurer, by the way." Veins bulged on his forehead, revealing his irritation. "Of course! It's been a while," Art exclaimed as he shook Feyrith's hand. Feyrith returned the greeting with cautiousness, as if unsure about Art's reaction. Feyrith's uniform, a solid black with gold stripes adorning his shoulders, was simpler than the others but suited him well. Last but not least, this is Theodore Maxwell. Claire positioned herself between Art and Feyrith, guiding his attention toward the final member of the group. Seems the disciplinary committee has stooped low enough to recruit twerps." Theodore's voice dripped with disdain as he rose from his seat. The way he stood reminded Art of a bear, towering at least 6.5 feet tall, rivaling Grotter's height. Theodore's uniform appeared to be a vest, unbuttoned to expose his bulging muscles. Ragged seams at the armholes suggested it hadn't been intended as a vest in the first place. Stepping forward, Theodore positioned himself in front of Art, placing a hand on his shoulder. In that moment, Art could swear the weight of the world pressed down on him. His feet began sinking, and cracks formed on the floor around him. Theodore was clearly a deviant, capable of manipulating gravity. Though Art's body could endure the strain, thanks to the assimilation he underwent with Sylvia's dragon will, it wasn't without resistance. Strengthening himself with mana, he lifted Theodore's hand off his shoulder, their eyes locking in a silent challenge. Was Theodore testing him? The cold, wordless gaze Art directed at him was met with Theodore releasing his grip and walking away. As he departed, Theodore muttered, "Not bad." A whistle pierced through the chatter of students gathered in the room. "Arthur's got guts. Feyrith crumbled to his knees when Theodore did that to him." Kai's snickering voice came from the sidelines. "I am a conjurer, and Arthur is an augmenter. Please don't compare me to brutes like you, Firith snapped back, his face flushed with embarrassment. Now, I'm excited to see what this semester holds for us. We're a team now, folks. We'll have plenty of opportunities to bond and get closer, so let's embrace it. Claire's cheerful voice rang out as she extended her hand. I'm looking forward to it. Kai added his bandaged hand to Claire's, maintaining his mocking grin. Aye, looks like we're in for some interesting times. Doradria stretched up on her toes to place her beefy hand atop Kai's. Yes, let's give it our best. Curtis joined in, and Kathleen followed suit without a word. Having just met everyone, Art was already feeling tired. I'm sure it'll be a blast, he murmured as he added his hand on top of Kathleen's. Sylvie scampered down his arm and placed her paw in the circle as well. Theodore's colossal hand landed on top of Sylvie's paw and Art's hand, causing the circle to sway slightly. He offered a silent nod, prompting Claire to break into a wide, confident smile and shout, To us, the disciplinary committee! Aye, the group echoed in agreement. Before the club rush commences, the Student Council would like to formally introduce to you the students of this academy, a group that was personally picked by the director to resolve and prevent disputes among students, as well as enforce punishments for troublemakers. Tessia's voice resonated as she reached her final words. Applause erupted throughout the auditorium as the red curtains in front of them were drawn open. The members of the disciplinary committee stood tall, shoulders squared, and hands poised at their sides. In their color-coordinated uniforms, which held an air of authority, they made an imposing presence, boosted by figures like Curtis with Grotter behind him, Theodore, Claire, and even Fairith. Art caught Tessia's gaze on him briefly, but she quickly averted her eyes. Center stage, side by side, the committee drew their knives and held them aloft, displaying the insignia. As the blades were unsheathed, a collective bow was offered before they saluted the crowd. Claire, representing the disciplinary committee, delivered a succinct speech, after which they made their exit from the stage, leaving the audience with a mix of emotions. For some students, the committee signaled a restraint against their unruly behavior. For others, it symbolized a safeguard against threats and danger. In any case, it promised to be an intriguing school year ahead. Hey, isn't that one of the DC officers? I think his name was Arthur, right? Isn't he only a first year? How did he get on the disciplinary committee? He must have connections or something. That's dumb. Even if he does have connections, he'd still have to be really strong to be on the disciplinary committee. He's kinda cute, no? Yeah, he's totally my type. That white fox on top of his head is so adorable. Art sat near the back of the classroom with Elijah beside him. The constant hum of chatter bouncing off the walls made his head ache. The professor for their first class, Fundamentals of Mana Theory, hadn't arrived yet, and the endless gossip about that morning's ceremony filled the air. Look at how popular you are, Mr. DC officer, Elijah muttered, elbowing him with a teasing smirk. Before Art could respond, a man, presumably the professor, strode confidently into the room. He looked fairly young, perhaps in his mid-30s at most. His brown hair was neatly combed with a distinct side part, and his freshly shaven face revealed a narrow, defined jawline. Though on the lean side, he carried himself with the posture of someone disciplined and capable. The wand strapped to his hip confirmed what Art had already guessed. He was a conjurer. Using the folder in his hand like a gavel, the man struck it against the podium with a sharp thump before speaking. Now, I realize there are many wonderful things to talk about, he began, his tone light but commanding. But you all aren't very good at gossiping. If the subject of your conversation is in the same room and can hear you, then it really isn't gossip, now is it? His gaze flicked toward Art, and he gave a playful wink. Art could only sigh and shake his head in defeat. A few students shrank into their seats, faces reddening, while the rest burst out laughing, the tension in the room dissolving at once. My name is Professor Avius, and I must say that it's great to meet you all. This is technically a basic class, and some may think it's unnecessary. I, on the other hand, believe this class is the foundation for what will make you a great mage. We won't be doing much casting, but there will be fun assignments and projects that I will assign along the way. That's something we can look forward to." The class erupted in a collective groan at the mention of projects. Art couldn't imagine what kind of assignments the professor would give to 12 to 14-year-olds, but he assumed they'd be fairly simple. "On that note," the professor continued cheerfully, "I think today is a fine day for a lecture. No one's getting any younger, so absorb as much knowledge as you can while your brains are still fresh. Take out your notebooks and writing utensils." His thin face creased with a wide smile. Beside Art, Elijah adjusted his glasses with practiced precision before pulling out a brand new notebook and pen. He neatly wrote the class title and date across the top of the first page, posture perfectly upright. Art, on the other hand, merely leaned forward, propping his chin on his hand as he prepared to listen. "Today's topic," the professor announced, turning to the chalkboard, "will focus on the segregation between conjurers and augmenters." He scrawled the title in uneven handwriting before continuing. "There exists a deeply ingrained discrimination against augmenters by conjurers, based on the ignorant idea that augmenters are brutes or savages who only know how to fight by getting themselves dirty." He raised his fingers to mimic quotation marks. "This is a misconception that should be abandoned here and now." His tone hardened, his expression growing serious. His statement sparked a wave of murmurs, some of agreement, others of dissent. "Speaking as a conjurer myself," he went on, tapping the chalk against the board, "it's foolish to claim we are superior simply because our bodies are more naturally suited for influencing mana remotely. This advantage only exists in the lower stages of development." He wrote as he spoke, emphasizing each point. "Once a mage reaches the silver stage, whether conjurer or augmenter, the distinction in control begins to fade. The purity of the mana produced by the core allows manipulation both remotely and directly, regardless of whether one relies more on mana veins or mana channels." He underlined remotely and directly, then circled less of a distinction with a flourish. Beside him, Art heard Elijah let out an impressed "ooh" as he scribbled furiously, determined not to miss a single word. This professor, at least, knew what he was talking about. Art had learned through his own training that at the higher stages of mana core cultivation, the distinctions between conjurers and augmenters truly began to blur. "So tell me, class," the professor began, pacing slowly before the chalkboard. "If, in the end, two mages, one a conjurer and one an augmenter, both reach the silver core stage, who would have the advantage? I say it would be evenly matched, or perhaps even tilted in the augmenter's favor." The classroom immediately erupted into protest. Students exchanged shocked glances, a few openly shaking their heads. "Before you shoot me down," the professor said, holding up a hand with a faint smile, "think carefully about this. Until the silver stage, assuming both have the talent and luck to reach it, conjurers and augmenters alike spend their lives training in magic. However, augmenters also train in hand-to-hand combat, honing their bodies alongside their mana from the very moment they awaken, which is often before puberty." He began pacing again, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. "As the augmenter's core matures, he naturally develops his long-range capabilities as well, though they may remain slightly inferior to those of a conjurer at first. But as he continues to refine his core, approaching the peak of his development, casting spells from a distance will become second nature. And unlike conjurers, he retains his physical prowess. So tell me, are conjurers really the more noble, dominant type of mage?" A hush fell over the classroom. Even the most vocal of the students sat in uneasy silence as his words sank in. "Some old-fashioned mages still cling to the belief that conjurers are the superior manipulators of mana," the professor went on, his tone softening. "But Director Cynthia, and many other influential figures across the continent, are working to change that misconception." He set down his chalk, folding his arms as he addressed the class one last time. "I implore you, all of you, to remember this. Augmenters, don't let this go to your heads. At your current stage, conjurers still hold the advantage. And conjurers, don't mope at the news. Train your bodies. Learn to fight. While you may not be as naturally adept at shaping mana around your form, spells can still fortify you. Adapt. He closed his notes with a crisp snap and looked around the room, allowing a long moment of silence to settle, before asking with a genial smile, "Any questions?" Elijah's hand shot up immediately. The professor pointed at him with an approving nod. "Professor," Elijah said, voice steady and thoughtful behind his glasses, "if what you're saying is true, then what would the final outcome be for both categories of mages once they reach the silver stage, or higher?" The professor glanced down at his notes before answering, his tone measured and thoughtful. "Good question, Elijah Knight." He adjusted his spectacles and continued. "The end result, ultimately, is two mages with different preferences in their fighting styles. At this stage, a conjurer will be able to imbue his body with mana, just as an augmenter can at lower stages. But his approach to combat will still favor long-range engagement. He'll rely on weaving layers of spells to deceive and outmaneuver an opponent, especially an augmenter who might hold the upper hand once in close quarters. He turned back to the blackboard, jotting down key phrases as he spoke. "As for the augmenter," he went on, "while long-range spells will feel more natural for them at this level, just as they do for conjurers, they will still tend to favor close combat. Their use of projectile spells will remain more direct, less intricate. Augmenters are not as accustomed to remote fighting as conjurers, who rely heavily on preemptive layering, multicasting and chain casting to keep distance between themselves and danger." He circled the keywords on the board with a flourish before turning back to the class. Elijah nodded thoughtfully, his pen gliding quickly across the page as he transcribed nearly every word. A few other students raised questions afterward, but before long, the deep toll of the tower bell echoed through the building, signaling the end of the period. The professor closed his notes with a satisfied nod. "That will be all for today. Review your notes and come prepared for next time." As the students began filing out, Elijah slung his bag over his shoulder and glanced toward Art. "I'll see you at lunch then?" "Sure," Art replied, giving him a small grin. "Whoever gets there first saves the other a spot in line." He patted Elijah on the back before heading out the door. As Art made his way through the bustling hallway, the air thick with chatter and the shuffling of robes, he could feel occasional gazes lingering on him. Some curious, others admiring, a few perhaps envious. His disciplinary committee uniform drew quiet recognition wherever he went. When Art finally arrived at his next class, he immediately noted how different the room was from the usual lecture halls. The space opened up like a miniature arena, with a battle platform at its center surrounded by rows of tiered seating. A shimmering barrier field enclosed the platform, humming faintly, a clear sign that students here wouldn't just be learning theory. Choosing a random seat in the middle rows, Art sank down and let out a quiet breath. "I'm hungry." Sylvie's voice grumbled in his mind, her tiny paws thumping impatiently against the top of his head. "Yeah, me too," Art murmured under his breath, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Lunch is still a bit away, though. Do you want to go and catch something?" Sylvie gave a quick nod before darting off, her small form disappearing in a blur that made Art blink. She was always fast when food was involved, unnaturally so. Within minutes, the classroom began to fill. Voices echoed softly across the arena-like space as students trickled in, some chatting in clusters, others taking seats in silence. Most of them were first years, though a few older faces, second years by the look of it, had joined as well, likely retaking or delaying the course for their own reasons. "May I sit here?" Art turned to find Kathleen standing beside him, clad neatly in her disciplinary committee uniform. Her posture was as composed as ever, her expression cool and unreadable. "Sure, go ahead," he said. Kathleen inclined her head slightly in thanks, before smoothing the front of her skirt with a graceful motion and sitting down, back straight, eyes forward. "Well, look who we have here, if it isn't Princess Kathleen and my rival, Arthur Leywin." The familiar, overconfident voice drew Art's attention to the door, where Fairith strolled in with his usual swagger. Rival? Art blinked. Since when did that happen? And in what, exactly? Aren't you loud this morning? Art muttered, resting his chin on his hands as he regarded Fairith with mild exasperation. Well, it is a fine morning. Didn't the welcoming ceremony make you excited? Fairith said with a huff as he dropped into the seat beside Art. Art gave him a sidelong glance. Why is he sitting next to me? He thought. I could have sworn he wasn't particularly fond of me. Although it's a bit late into the morning, it's still technically morning, so good morning. The cheerful voice drew everyone's attention to the front of the room, where a man wearing light armor clapped his hands together. He was broad-shouldered and muscular, looking more like a weathered adventurer than a professor. But when Art briefly inspected his manicore, he was surprised to find it glowing at the light yellow stage. Well, we have quite the crowd of students, the man continued, grinning. I knew my class would be popular, but I'm honored to have this many of you. My name is Professor Geist. Welcome, ladies and gents, and welcome, DC officers. It's a privilege to have you in my class. Art couldn't tell if the professor's tone was genuine or mocking, but he decided to ignore it. Geist then launched into a long recounting of his achievements as an adventurer, boasting about dungeon expeditions and his prowess with both magic and sword. His booming voice carried through the hall, though it didn't stop several students from nodding off mid-story. Finally, with a sharp clang, Geist slammed his sheathed sword onto the floor, startling everyone back to attention. Enough about me, he declared, his deep bass voice filling the arena-like classroom. This is practical mana manipulation, or PMM as I like to call it. That means we'll be doing things very practically. And by practically, I mean through example. What better way to learn than by hands-on experience, right? He paced along the edge of the platform, eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. I know most of you are first years, and many of you might have only recently awakened. Now, many parents these days start training their children before they even set foot in the academy, but for the sake of fairness, I'll assume every first year here is a beginner in mana manipulation. He paused, grin widening, with a few exceptions, of course, such as the three sitting right there. His finger pointed directly at Art, Catheln, and Fairith, punctuating the moment with a wink. Dozens of eyes turned toward them, whispers rippling through the room. I'm sure we're all curious to see what kind of ability the members of our newly formed disciplinary committee can boast, Geist said with a chuckle. After all, they'll be responsible for protecting the students of this academy, right? A few students cheered in agreement, clearly entertained by the idea. Art exhaled quietly, rubbing at the bridge of his nose. This is going to be a pain in the ass, he thought. Even Catheln, whose expression rarely wavered, showed a faint flicker of irritation at the professor's antics. Well, if Professor Geist insists. Fairith rose from his seat, placing his right hand proudly over his heart. On behalf of the disciplinary committee, whose members were personally chosen by Director Goodsky, I shall volunteer to demonstrate the abilities of our group. Oh, brother, Art thought, suppressing a sigh. That's more like it, Professor Geist boomed with a hearty laugh. Fairith, correct? Come on down to the stage. Fairith leapt gracefully from his seat, landing lightly in the battle arena at the center of the large, circular classroom. A few students clapped and cheered, while others leaned forward, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The professor rubbed his chin as he studied the young elf. If I had to guess, you're a light orange stage conjurer. Water attribute, yes? That's quite impressive for a 15-year-old, even among elves. That is correct, Fairith replied, his tone polite, yet tinged with pride. And since I cannot sense your manicore level, I assume yours is much higher than my own. It's an honor to receive your instruction. Though his words were respectful, there was a faint edge to them, a quiet arrogance that suggested he believed the gap between them wasn't as wide as it seemed. Of course, Geist said, chuckling. Now, since I'm at the light yellow stage, to make this demonstration fair, I'll only use long-range attacks. He reached toward his belt, pulling a gleaming two-handed sword from a small dimensional artifact, and drove it into the ground behind him with a heavy clang. Faerith's brow twitched, clearly about to object that such restraint wasn't necessary, but Geist spoke first, his grin widening. "This way, if I lose, I'll at least have an excuse. Please, cut this old man some slack." He punctuated the remark with a playful wink, earning a ripple of laughter from the watching students. He sounded sincere enough, but Art could tell the professor was completely confident he'd win, even with that self-imposed handicap. "Faerith is going to lose," Kathleen said quietly beside him. "Oh, really? How can you tell?" Art asked, glancing at her. For him, it was just instinct, a gut feeling, but Kathleen's tone carried a certainty that suggested she saw something he didn't. She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the arena. Art gave a small shrug and turned his attention back to the mock battle below. "Let me quickly set up the barrier before we begin, so our audience remains safe from stray projectiles," Professor Geist announced. He muttered a few incantations, and the space around the stage shimmered faintly with mana, a translucent barrier rising around it. "Let us begin," he declared with a grin. Faerith raised his wand, his expression sharp with focus. "Water Serpent!" A stream of water spiraled around him, twisting into the form of a massive serpent. "Flood Domain!" he followed up immediately, invoking a higher-tier spell that altered the battlefield itself. Water flooded the arena, climbing up to their knees, and the serpent dove into the newly formed pool, its body slithering beneath the surface. "Fireball," Professor Geist murmured. Art raised an eyebrow. The most basic of spells, a beginner's technique, seemed almost laughable here, but when the flame ignited in Geist's hand, it wasn't the familiar reddish-orange hue. It burned a cold, dim blue. Art's eyes widened slightly. He's controlling the temperature of the flame itself. It was rare enough for an augmenter to understand such precise elemental manipulation, something even the most adept conjurers struggled to achieve. The azure fireball shot forward, streaking toward Faerith like a comet. "You'll have to do better than that, Professor!" Faerith shouted confidently, flicking his wand upward. The water covering the ground surged into a thick wall before him, shimmering with mana reinforcement. At the same time, his water serpent erupted from the pool beside Professor Geist, jaws open wide as it lunged at him. Geist's left arm ignited in that same eerie blue flame, and he met the serpent head-on. The moment the two attacks collided, a violent burst of steam exploded outward, engulfing the professor in a dense white cloud that obscured him from view. Meanwhile, the blue fireball slammed into the wall of water. Geist's spell cut through Faerith's defense with a sharp hiss, weakened but far from destroyed by the barrier. Faerith's face drained of color as he realized his initial defense had failed, but he quickly raised another layer of water in front of him, barely mitigating the impact. Oof! The fireball, now reduced to the size of a fingernail, still tore a hole in Faerith's protective uniform and sent him stumbling back a few steps before he collapsed onto his rear. "Do you surrender?" Professor Geist asked, emerging from the cloud of steam with a wide grin, juggling two more glowing blue fireballs in his hand. "Yes, I concede," Faerith replied, trudging back to his seat, his head bowed in shame and his uniform soaked. The students murmured among themselves, doubt flickering in their voices about the competence of the disciplinary committee members. "You did well, Faerith," Art said, patting the elf on the back. Faerith had indeed performed admirably, especially considering he had no idea what he was facing. What is this professor trying to do? Make fools of us to boost his ego? Art wondered. "Would anyone else like to volunteer?" Geist asked, his gaze sweeping over the class, finally settling on Kathleen and Art. Art was about to raise his hand when Kathleen shot upright, bowing formally to the professor before stepping lightly into the arena. "Kathleen Glader, it is an honor to have you in my humble class," Professor Geist said, bowing deeply in an exaggerated gesture. "Whatever the results of this demonstration may be, Please don't hold them against me. Cathelne's cold expression remained unreadable as she simply nodded, drawing her sky-blue staff from the dimension ring on her pinky. Very good. Let us proceed. Geist clapped his hands together, igniting fire between his palms. Without a word, Cathelne raised her staff. Before Geist could launch his fireball, 2 javelins of ice formed around her. Fire, she commanded, sending the icy projectiles hurtling toward the professor. She had chosen to strike first, taking the offensive rather than waiting for his attack. A faint smirk appeared on Geist's face as he lifted his flaming hands to intercept the ice spears. The javelin sizzled on contact with the fire, melting instantly with a sharp hiss. Ice javelin, she muttered again, and 5 spinning javelins materialized near her, poised to strike. Fire, she added, her expression remaining as icy and unyielding as ever, like a coiled serpent ready to strike. Impressive, as I would expect from our princess, Geist said with a grin, and the class leaned forward, captivated. Most of the first-year students lacked the skill or speed to conjure such precise, immediate control over multiple projectiles, making Cathelne's display all the more remarkable. Professor Geist focused intently as the 5 ice javelins shot toward him, ready to pierce if left unchecked. Ember wisps, he shouted, completing his spell just in time. Small, floating orbs of blue flame sprang from his hands as he leapt backward. Art couldn't help but notice. The spell looked exactly like the one Lucas had used during his rank examination. Break, Cathelne muttered, shattering her 5 ice javelins into countless sharp shards. Fire, Geist barked, commanding his ember wisps to blast toward her. Cathelne remained so focused on completing her spell that she barely noticed the incoming flames. Art leapt from his seat, racing toward the arena platform, gathering a concentrated burst of wind attribute mana as he went. Ice tornado! Catheline's voice rang out, tinged with panic as she realized the full force of Geist's attack was headed her way. The tornado of spinning ice shards whirled around her, and Geist's confident composure faltered. He had clearly not anticipated her neglecting defense. He canceled his spell, but only the ember wisps vanished. The streams of blue fire already released toward Cathelne could no longer be stopped. Just as they were about to strike, Art thrust a hand through the barrier and unleashed a powerful gust of wind, pushing her out of harm's way. The fire crashed harmlessly against the inside of the barrier behind her, dispersing into fading sparks. Professor Geist quickly activated Scorchfield, cloaking himself in a layer of intense heat that melted the storm of ice shards swirling around him. The flames hissed as they met the melting frost, and though a few shallow scratches marked his skin, he barely seemed to notice. As the last remnants of ice vaporized into mist, his eyes darted across the arena, searching for Cathelne, only to find Art standing in her place. When their eyes met, Geist faltered. The confident smirk he'd worn moments ago wavered under the weight of Art's glare. I think this little game of yours has gone on long enough, don't you agree? Art's voice was low, controlled, but edged with a sharp, unmistakable threat. His expression remained hard and unyielding, stripped of any pretense of politeness. While I appreciate your concern for the princess, it is unnecessary. I have everything under control, Geist replied, his tone thin and defensive. It was clear he was struggling to maintain authority, unwilling to lose face in front of his students on the very first day. Under control? Art's brow twitched, the barely restrained fury behind his words impossible to miss. Yes, Geist pressed on, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Do you really think I, a professor at this esteemed academy, would actually put one of my students in harm's way? The sheer audacity of the claim made Art's jaw tighten. He knew full well that once the ember wisps fired their streams of blue flame, they couldn't be recalled, a fact anyone with real combat experience would know. Still, since Cathelne had come out unscathed, there was no point in publicly calling him out. I see, Art said at last, his voice calm but laced with quiet steel. In that case, allow me to take the place of my colleague in this demonstration. Professor Geist hesitated only for a second before smirking. Well, if you insist. I seem to have frightened the princess with my last spell. If you hadn't interrupted, you would have seen that I was just about to cancel the spell. I'd hate for any of my students to misunderstand and think I was actually trying to hurt her. Even now, the incompetent professor was scrambling to defend his position, and by the murmurs rippling through the class, it was clear that many of the students had already accepted his excuse. Art turned toward Cathal, concern softening his expression. "Are you okay?" Cathal had already regained her composure. Her face was calm, though a faint flush still lingered on her cheeks as she gave a curt nod. "Your assistance was unnecessary, but thank you all the same," she said coolly before returning to her seat. Turning back to Professor Geist, Art drew Dawn's ballad. "Please allow me the privilege of learning from you firsthand." The translucent teal blade shimmered in the light, drawing a wave of gasps and hushed whispers from the students. Even Professor Geist couldn't hide the glint of greed in his wide eyes as he stared at the sword. "Quite a nice weapon you've got there," Professor Geist remarked, his tone edged with feigned casualness. "Since you're an augmenter, I suppose it would be fair to let you choose which method you want me to use to fight." He gave a loose shrug as he strode toward his sword, still embedded in the floor. "It doesn't matter," Art replied flatly. A vein pulsed at the professor's temple as he glanced back in irritation. "I insist," he pressed. "Please, use whatever you're most confident in." Art stepped forward, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied every movement and shift in Geist's posture. Scum or not, this man was still a veteran augmenter, light yellow core class, and one skilled enough to manipulate blue fire. The professor's grin soured into a scowl, his face reddening. It was clear he had hoped to impress his students, and Art's calm indifference only made him look smaller. "Very well then," Geist said tightly. "I'll be sure to go easy on you." Despite his attempt at levity, the twitch of his brows betrayed his irritation. Pulling his sword free from the ground, Professor Geist strode toward Art, his weapon moving with a dancer's grace as it spun lightly in his grip. Without warning, he lunged forward, bringing his blade down in a strike that carried far more force than his earlier promise to go easy implied. The steel shimmered with blue fire, radiating intense heat. Art met the attack head-on, parrying the strike and channeling wind attribute mana to divert the trail of fire away from him before it could sear his uniform. With only wind and earth mana at his disposal, Art had to stay sharp, calculating each move, thinking through every possible angle to offset his opponent's strength. Using blue fire himself would have made this easy, but that option wasn't available. Geist's onslaught didn't relent. His strikes came faster, sharper, each blow carrying more power than the last, as if he were probing for a weakness. Art countered them all, smooth, precise, relying only on mana strengthening and refined technique. The more effortlessly he deflected, the tighter Geist's jaw became. "I'm sure the disciplinary committee isn't made only of rats who keep dodging and running away," the professor said, forcing a grin as he spoke loud enough for the class to hear. "Is there really a need for me to attack when our esteemed professor can't even land a single blow on a first-year student?" Art said, feigning innocence as he tilted his head slightly. Professor Geist's lips twisted in barely contained anger, but he didn't answer. A low murmur rippled through the students, some beginning to realize this was far from a friendly classroom demonstration. A few whispered anxiously about whether they should fetch the director or the student council. The professor's composure cracked. His swings grew wilder, his movements sharper, his voice rising as he layered spells into his attacks. "Flame Pillar!" he shouted. Blue fire erupted from the floor beneath Art. He darted aside, the flames licking at his boots as he countered with a quick, deliberate strike aimed at Geist's throat. Caught off guard, the professor stumbled backward, far more than necessary, his eyes widening as a bead of sweat trailed down his temple. "Even rats become deadly when cornered, Professor," Art said coolly, his smirk cutting deeper than any blade. In a blink, He closed the gap between them. Wind mana swirled around his sword, shaping invisible edges that hummed with power. Each swing he took carved a trail of compressed air, the shifting currents throwing Geist off balance. Though the professor managed to block each blow, confusion flickered in his eyes as the transparent paths of wind wove and lingered around them, hemming him in with ghostly precision. Professor Geist no longer wore the mask of confidence he'd started with. His expression had hardened into grim focus as he struggled to parry the relentless storm of Art's blows. Step by step, he was forced backward, inching toward the edge of the arena. The blue flames coating his sword wavered, dimming under the pressure of each strike. It was time to end this. Art willed the ground beneath Geist's next step to dip suddenly, the earth caving just enough to throw him off balance. The professor stumbled, but his veteran instincts kicked in. He recovered almost instantly. Almost. That fraction of a second was all Art needed. The many arcs of wind left behind by his previous strikes suddenly shimmered to life, converging with deadly intent. Art moved faster than before, his sword a blur of motion that left no room for error. Each slash became a seamless continuation of the last, and with every strike, the air itself answered his will. Tempest unleashed, a torrent of razor-sharp wind trailing each swing. The clash of steel and storm filled the arena, his final barrage a perfect symphony of speed, precision, and elemental fury. Overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught, Professor Geist could no longer keep up. The sheer number of strikes forced him to retreat awkwardly until, with a startled cry, he lost his footing and fell onto his back, rolling out of the arena in a clumsy heap. The protective barrier surrounding the platform flickered violently under the pressure of Art's Tempest spell. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface until, with a sharp crack, it shattered. The storm of wind dispersed all but one final blade, a razor-thin crescent that sliced past Geist's neck, leaving a shallow line of blood. Fortunately, his mana-reinforced body prevented the strike from being fatal, but the color had drained from his face. He lay flat on the ground, chest heaving, staring wide-eyed as Art stepped forward and drove his sword into the floor beside his throat, close enough that the steel hummed against his carotid artery. Art withdrew his blade with calm precision and slipped it back into his dimension ring. "Thank you for your guidance," he said evenly, his tone neither mocking nor kind. The bell rang at that exact moment, echoing through the classroom. Without another glance at the fallen professor, Art turned and strode toward the exit. Catheln had already left, her composure as unshaken as ever. "Princess Catheln," he called, quickening his pace to catch up. Just as Art caught up to the ice mage, a hand gripped his shoulder. "Arthur, I admit you were rather impressive back there," Faerith said with a proud nod, "as to be expected of my rival." Art gave the elf a small smile and tapped him lightly on the chest. "You did good out there, Faerith. If you'd known the kind of spell the professor was using, I'm sure you would have set up more preventive measures." "Of course. I hadn't anticipated that he would use such a strong spell," Faerith replied, his tone half joking, half defensive. "Otherwise, I'm sure I would have come out as the victor." Despite his words, a faint smile tugged at his lips, one that showed he appreciated Art's confidence in him. Catheln, who had slowed her pace so that she was only a few steps ahead, suddenly turned to face them. "What do you suggest my mistakes were?" she asked, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Taken aback, Art stopped walking, causing Faerith to bump into his back. He scratched his head awkwardly. Well, if I can be blunt, I'd say ignoring your defense to finish that last spell was your biggest mistake, Princess Catheln." Her piercing stare lingered on him for a tense moment, long enough for him to wonder if he'd said too much, but then she gave a curt nod and turned away without another word. "Well, I should get going as well," Faerith added with a strained chuckle, quickly making his exit. Art was left alone in the hallway for only a few seconds before a familiar cry reached his ears. "Q!" Sylvie scurried up his arm and perched on top of his head, ruffling his hair with her tiny paws. "Ah, I'm full. How was class, Papa?" Art reached up to pat his bond affectionately, a tired smile forming on his face. Meh, it was okay.